Okay.
How are you?
Good. Welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. So you know me, I'm Melissa Suarez. These are two of my kindergarten teachers, Jess Griffin and Michelle Carrillo. There are two other kindergarten teachers that aren't here tonight, but we came to talk to you about a recognition that Mount Caesar is receiving on Thursday. The PIC Center, Parent Information Center in Concord, traditionally holds October as a family engagement month. And they were looking for nominations of schools or healthcare providers or mental health facilities workers to be nominated for their good quality work in engaging families. And so one of our, well, she's here actually, our school counselor, Kelsey Kilburn, who's also in the crowd back there hiding. She nominated our school for this recognition because of the work that our kindergarten team did this summer in welcoming our kindergarten students to our school. So if you don't already know the story behind that, I'll share with you very briefly. We have 75 kindergartners, I believe, this year, maybe even a little bit more at this time. And this summer, the entire kindergarten team, myself, and our administrative assistant went and visited the homes of every single kindergarten student, welcomed them to our school. Each of the students got a t-shirt that matched their teacher's t-shirt. So Jess was in green wearing a Husky Pups t-shirt, and Michelle was in blue, sorry. And there was an orange and a yellow for the other two teachers. And we went to every door, knocked on their door, welcomed them to kindergarten as a team, and just really tried to build that family engagement with them right away, as this is, for many of them, their first school experience. If we didn't get to meet the child because they weren't home, we left, and Nick could tell you about this, because we went to his house as well. We left an envelope on the door with a picture of the teacher in the envelope wearing the t-shirt, and a little welcome to school letter, and just another place for them to connect. We posted pictures of every single child on Facebook. We were on the front page of the paper for this family engagement, and we're just really, I'm really proud of our teachers for taking time, 2 whole days, traveling from either end of our district, knocking on those doors and welcoming our kids. So it's really a celebratory thing for them to be recognized on Thursday.
Well done.
And again next year too. So, any questions or?
I just want to say,
It was in the rooster. Yes, thank you, Neil. I appreciate that.
I want to say thank you. This really moves me, and you guys have done amazing work.
Well, thank you. We got a lot of feedback from families that was fantastic, and one of the unintended outcomes, I had a parent that called me the next day, and she said, we weren't home to receive, the welcome in person, but we got this envelope, and now I can see, who my child's teacher is. But in addition to that, because of the social media, I can go on Facebook and see a picture of every single child who's going to be in my child's classroom. So I can say, here are all the green t-shirts, here are all the blue t-shirts. And we've had a ton of good feedback from our families. And I think, we'll learn each year as we go along, but I think their transition to school was much better. And that was only one event. We did 3 or 4 other events as well to welcome them back, but that was the big one. So.
Bravo, great job. My only question is, I'm a little bit nervous about posting kids' pictures on social media. Could you
Yeah, so we
explain
have permission for all of them.
We do have permission.
Absolutely.
All I
Yep.
need- Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. No problem. Any other questions? Thanks, guys, for having us tonight. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
All right, so I have the gavel. Apparently, Rob Scrocky, are you available? Thanks. So question number 1 is, how are you doing on fundraising?
We're doing pretty well. So to date, since January 1st of the year, we've raised, for the band trip specifically, $25,471 as an entire group.
What do you need?
What do we need? There is $41,219 left to pay on the trip. As of right now, our families have contributed $26,110. That's as of 6:30 tonight.
What's your shortfall?
I'm sorry?
What is your shortfall? Is it the full 41,000, or have parents paid part of the 41,000?
Our total start of the trip was $92,680.
Okay.
Sorry, there's like
Yeah,
feedback.
it sounds like we
I
have a
hear that
technical
too.
issue.
I hear it too. So if you have something prepared, go ahead.
I just have that to report for you.
So, how do you feel about fundraising, and what do you think the board is going to have to do to support you in this trip?
Sure. So as of right now, I've reached out to many of the families that I would expect to be, or that have approached me about being, in severe financial need for the trip since we met last. And there are 15 families that are extremely worried about not being able to pay for the trip and have contributed $0 so far. Those students do have less than $500 in their fundraising account. So what I'm hoping is at least half a match for that for those families. So anything that the board at this point would be willing to contribute would be great. I didn't bring a specific dollar value, not knowing that that was expected. But we'd certainly be open and very welcoming to any contribution the board would feel comfortable in making.
How much is your deposit?
For the trip itself, like how much is the individual trip per person?
You needed to make a deposit in November.
Yes, so we have to pay the remaining $41,219 by November 1st.
Okay.
And of that 41,000, you do have, how much from parent contribution? 26,000? Is that what you said?
So the total cost of the trip was just over $92,000. Minus the fundraising money was $67,000, and then minus the 41 was how I got the $26,000
Okay.
That the parents have contributed.
So you have 41 left to go.
We have $41,000 left to pay on the trip. That's correct.
By November 1?
By November 1st.
So I put something in the rooster, and it's not going to be out by November 1st, and you're not going to get the money. So what would happen to the money if I did collect it? It's not coming to me, by the way, it's going to whoever you designated.
Sure.
You didn't do it personally, Lillian did.
And thank you very much for doing that. So money that comes in after November 1st, there's still several expenses that we're responsible to pay for other than the students getting there, such as travel expenses for the equipment, things like that. Not every meal is included for students while we're in Florida, but most are. So meals on the way there, on the way back, we're hoping to buy gift cards for students to use at the various rest areas that we stop at, things like that. So any contributions that are made after the November 1st deadline will go towards that.
What happens?
Go ahead.
Sorry, what happens if you don't raise the 41,000 by November 1st?
There is a late fee. We are able to pay after that, but it is a pretty hefty late fee. In speaking with many parents, they're just kind of waiting until the end, which, is partially my fault due to the whole fundraising thing. But they're waiting to see how much fundraising we can possibly make. We did just jump on another opportunity to work at the Monadnock Pumpkin Festival this weekend, doing various things that they need. So we'll be there all weekend doing cleanup, setup, all those sorts of things in hopes of raising a little bit more money for those students that really are in need. But
I have Scott, and then I think Jeremy. Yeah? No?
You asked my question, I'm good.
All right. Rob?
I think Jeremy was.
No. He was just stretching.
Who's paying for you? I don't want to hear that you're paying for yourself.
I'm not. No, that was part of the trip
and
package. As the director is complimentary.
Adults going down.
The adults are paying for themselves, with the exception of Ryan Schaefer, whose trip we are paying for as a band for
Are the
him
adults
being
all
willing to go.
parents?
I'm sorry?
Are the adults all parents?
Yes.
Parents of the kids?
Parents, yeah, or older siblings of the kids.
Go ahead.
How much is it for one kid to go, Rob?
It's $1,160.
And you said you had 15 kids that were in jeopardy at
Yes.
this point, 15 families. The big question is always, do we have the money?
Right.
So, we have next on our agenda matters that require board action, and we have the Outback Bowl support, so that we can roll right into motions or conversation. Before we make any motions, Betty had put out a challenge to us as board members. I'd like to start by answering that call and say, Janelle, I would like, my board member salary for this fiscal year to be redirected to support the band trip.
So I did ask the question on whether or not you could do that, and you can't. You have to actually take your salary. If you then wanted to donate it, then you could. but you have to take your salary.
You won't get it before November 1.
So after taxes, it's
9 and change or whatever.
927.17. Thereabouts. Depends on what tax bracket you're in. But you have to have it taxed first, and then you can give it. Okay.
So typically, those payments are made to the board members in, I think, December, like right before the end of the year. Would we have the ability to, for those who opt to earmark it, would you be able to support the band's registration payment on November 1st?
Like that, yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, so sign me up.
Thank you.
All right, and this has to be a voluntary effort. We can't take a vote and force everyone to do it, but if board members feel that that's
Do you
the
any
appropriate.
good?
I'm sorry, what'd you say, Neil?
I said it wouldn't do you any good.
Right. So if board members feel that's an appropriate action for you and your family, you're welcome to do that, but is there any motion?
I'm sorry, I just have a question. I missed the back part of Scott's. So we can get the checks by the 1st if we want to sign them over to him? Is that what you just said?
I would look to Janelle on the mechanics of it, but my thinking is that if she's able to make, support the band in making their registration and payment, knowing that we're individually choosing or making that choice, that when it comes time to, help me out, Janelle, how you want to do it, when it comes time to write the check, you would write it, we'd immediately sign it back, or however you'd like to.
Yeah, we can certainly work out those logistics.
Lisa?
Right.
Yeah,
Winston?
we have a policy that the check's supposed to be made the first paid roll in December.
First payroll in December. All right. So that still leaves us with this $41,000 that are needed by November 1st, because the assumption is that anyone who defers their board stipend, it will go towards gift cards and meals and incidental expenses while the kids are down there.
How many students are we talking?
There's 80 students going on the trip and 14 adults. Plus me. There are, at this point, 25 students that have paid in full via fundraising and family contributions.
All right, so has anyone done the math for the 1150 times 15 students?
17,400, I believe. It was 1160, correct?
Correct. Thank you.
All right. Historically, does anyone know where we've taken this money from? Student activities, right?
In the past, when the board has voted, you have a line in your budget for student awards that you have used to give money to DI and purchase jackets for teams that win states and whatnot. How much
DI
money
has
is
already traveled this year?
$500 is what's in that budget line.
And DI has already traveled.
No, that happens in the spring.
Do you recall what we give to DI traditionally?
It has ranged from a couple thousand to many thousand, depending on their need and how many teams have won the opportunity to travel.
We did, sorry, how much did we do last year for them? It had to be like 3,500 maybe?
I was going to say 4,000.
Yeah, I thought it was 2,000 per team, so it was 4,000.
Right, I think that sounds about right.
We don't know whether we're going to have a championship football team or basketball team. Can't do nothing for them. Is there another line that we might consider for this?
I think it's a little early in the year to know whether or not we're going to have extra funds in other lines.
This is our last meeting before November 1st. Would anyone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion that we do the 17 whatever odd amount that Kristen will help me with.
17,400, I think it was.
In order to support the band trip with the line to be, with the discretion of the superintendent if there is a feasible line to take it from.
I'll second.
What was the amount?
17,400.
Nick?
Up to.
Up to.
I'd like to say, have it say up to 17,000.
That's a
In case you
good
get
idea.
more
I'll
funds
take
in,
that
you can
amendment.
reduce it.
I would love to just give you the money to help out with this, but you also have to understand that the money's going to come from someplace in the budget. And my concern is that you're going to place demands on the business side, and we're not going to have those funds, or they're going to come, they're going to end up sacrificing something else for it. So keeping within the dollar amount that we have set aside each year for these sorts of things, I would like to make an amendment to $2,500. If we have $7,500 set aside, and keeping in mind that there's also other sports and other competitions that students are going to be participating in, I'm trying to stick within the budget that we have, that our business administrator has presented us with.
All right, so that's.
I do not accept the amendment.
Okay.
Second it.
Janelle, are there areas of the budget that are unspent that would never be spent, in the sense of, for example, there are roles we haven't been able to fill. So we're 30 to 50 days of payroll we haven't paid out because we haven't staffed up to expected levels. Are there other areas, that's an area, or are there any other areas where from the particular budget lines it's not spent and we can be creative?
Well, we've already been working on being creative in hiring the extra paras for those 4 classrooms.
Right.
And the fact that we hadn't already placed those positions, and, so we've worked on that. And then last board meeting, Catherine Woods spoke about a social worker position, I believe, that we're funding from not filling a couple of those positions. So we're already being creative. I don't know if there's other room. I think that we filled our other positions.
Wow, right down the line. Okay, so I think I have Nick, Neil, then Rob, and then Karen. No? Nick, Neil,
When
Karen.
one person speaks, you don't go back to him until everyone else has spoken.
Where that's a rule, but
It's a general rule. Let's go to deliberative session and watch it.
Neil's my parliamentarian. How do you feel about that, Nick? Can Neil talk first?
yeah, let him go ahead.
Problem
Well,
solved.
we've usually, I think in the last 6 or 7 years, run $1 million surplus. So I don't think we're ever going to run out of money. But I think that, to $17,000 for one group, when you knew it was going to be high, you also mentioned that the families were sandbagging, waiting to see how much they should pay. I think Nick's number is a good number. You're welcome, Nick.
Karen.
Speaking of creative, there was, in one of the board meetings, you mentioned there's a money set aside in case somebody decides to retire and they get their stipend. And it's not necessarily, do we know if that money is going to be spent? Is that something that's available? And then I guess the other option is, because the board checks aren't going to come out until December, they need it in November, is it kind of like we can borrow from one and pay it back if a promise is made? So the money is there for November and we pay you back in December? I mean, I don't know legality-wise, but.
Right. I do think that there's a way that we can make that work. We do not pay the retirements until the end of the year. So again, I hesitate to say that money's unspent so early in the year.
Right, but don't they have to give 18-month notice? So if they haven't given notice, then anything that's budgeted for the end of this June isn't being paid out.
That's correct. I would have to look and see how much we've already committed, depending on who is intending to retire. And I know that historically also the board has accepted resignations and paid out the retirement anyway, early.
Nick, Rob.
If one of the board members who's really involved with finance would like to make a suggestion that would encumber or use funds that aren't spent, I'd love to hear that. But barring that, I'm going to trust our business administrator in terms of what we have available for finances and stick within that amount. And that's the way I'm going to vote tonight.
Rob, Sherry? Rob first.
What was the total DI cost? Because what I'm thinking of is essentially we set a precedent and we gave 4,000 or whatever it was. So there's going to be a percentage that it relates to what we gave in terms of what the total cost was. They're short nearly 45% of the cost of the trip. We're not going to be able to come up with that. Let's take that off the table. But if we've already set the precedent of what we've given to DI, then we could continue that from a percentage of what we gave to what their total trip cost. And that would be, I'd feel a lot more comfortable saying we've already done this before. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Without naming a dollar amount, what the, so for example, if their cost was 20,000 for the total trip and we gave them 4, whatever that percentage comes out to be, that's what I would be willing to do.
Sherry?
So we've made a motion up to. I don't think it's our job to figure out where the money comes from. I think we put it back in the hands of the leadership to figure that out. We also don't know what the student activity accounts might look like right now, which is not reflected in our balance sheets anywhere. We've said up to. If you don't want to do that much, vote it down, but I don't think it's our job to figure out where it comes from.
How would you feel, speaking of outside the box, if we reduced that number drastically and we said we'll offer up to this much as a match for any additional fundraising that they're able to do on their own?
For 2 weeks.
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah, 2 weeks is not a long time to do that.
And we're not funding the entire 41,000.
So where does that money come from?
What we don't know is what families are going to contribute on their own.
If I can just reiterate there's 15 families that have approached me that are looking for some sort of scholarship help to afford the trip. The other remainder of the money has been, the families have nodded their head and agreed to pay. So I'm definitely don't feel like I'm standing here asking for $41,000, please. That's just the facts, that's how much we have left to pay. But there is approximately $15,000 worth of that $41,000 that families are really concerned about coming up with.
And when you,
You may, yeah.
and when you said that they each have an account, and that it's these 15 kids that have less than 500 in their account?
In their fundraising accounts, that's correct.
Okay, so they've got less than half.
So, not to, maybe make a mess of the motion or distract, but I think that the spirit behind Betty's original challenge to us was that if we as board members can make the sacrifice and Janelle can assist us with making the mechanics of it work, that those funds could not necessarily fall after the November 1st deadline and just go to the ancillary expenses, but actually go to offset the cost. So I see Janelle nodding her head, and I just want to get a verbal confirmation that that's doable for those of us who...
Yeah.
Okay.
Therefore,
And
if we were to commit a match and board members committed their stipend, it would double the stipend in that short time. 2 weeks is not too long to make that happen. Betty?
no, I was just going to say, and my intent when I did the challenge was if you do your whole check, but some people might even be able to do part of their check. Because I know it's right up against Christmas and people may depend on that money for some, but I know I'm hearing Scott and I will do the whole check.
Yeah, I don't mean to put anybody on the spot, but it feels like if we could make those personal commitments, give Janelle that information, then we could quickly do the math of what's left
Right.
to raise. So we have 2,000. Do we have anybody else willing to make some or all of that challenge?
I'll do mine, just keep in mind I started in June, so I'm sure it will be prorated.
It won't.
Oh, okay.
So that's 3.
Brian?
So I guess I have a couple of questions about what your intent is, right? So I'm partially hesitant about putting the burden of deciding how much to spend in Lisa's hands. You know, I don't think that's fair to the board to sit here and say, you know, find as much as you can and let us know how much. I think it's our responsibility to give specific direction on what we want to do. So, you know, that burden is done and we agree as a, you know, a board together of how much we're going to do. You know, I think we're talking about a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Yeah, I understand that. I'm also hesitant for us to feel like it's our responsibility to pick up everyone who falls short. You know, so, you know, to me, I think we need to come back and give a specific dollar amount and take all of that responsibility off from, you know, the administration's shoulders. I'm open to discussion on that. We're talking about probably the largest percentage of student, you know, involvement within our school. This is I would say, and unless I'm wrong, the biggest group we have to do that. You know, we talked about the amount of money we gave DI last year. I'm pretty sure it was $3,500, and for some reason I have the total cost of that trip at like $15,000. I can't remember, but to do that.
Scott's nodding his head.
Yeah, it's different each year depending on how many teams go, and
Yeah.
each team is comprised of 3 to 7 kids thereabouts. Every year it's been a little bit different, but yeah, it's in that, you know, between 8 and 15,000 for between 5 and 15 kids, kind of depending on where it is in the country and the cost of airfare and things like that.
Yep. So I propose a friendly amendment to, if we have 80 students, $50 a student, that comes out to $4,000 to go off whatever the shortfall is. So if there are students that are already paid and they don't need that 50, I'm good with, you know, putting it to the best use we can. But I do think we need to give a dollar amount to the administration if we're going to agree on anything. So I propose 4,000.
All right, is that accepted by the motion maker? Jeremy?
So we were in Nick's amendment that was seconded by Neil. So
Nick's
which-
amendment was $2,500.
Yeah, so Brian, is that a second amendment?
Well, you didn't get a second anyway, Jeremy.
Yeah, so Nick didn't have a
Think-
second to
Nick
his
did have a
amendment.
second, he had Neil.
No, I'm talking about, he doesn't
Yeah,
have a
right.
second on his,
But
but
I-
he would just keep adding them on.
Nick proposed it as a friendly, and Sherry said no, thank you.
So then Neil seconded it as an
We
amendment.
didn't vote on anything.
We didn't vote on that yet.
I know. That's why I was confused as to where I put Brian's in
Neil,
order.
did you second as in favor of Nick's amendment?
Yeah.
And not friendly? Okay. So we're still discussing the 2,500 and.
Do a roll call.
Fair enough. I can be
And
patient.
Rob's proposing to increase that to 4,000. All right, let's vote on the 2,500.
So can I speak to one thing about it quickly?
Yes.
If we have a line item for doing this sort of thing of $7,500, I would love to do 4,000, but my concern is that leaves us with $3,500 for Destination Imagination, plus any championships that are won throughout the year. That's my concern.
Just my 2 cents
Yeah.
there. Absolutely agree. My hope in that is that gives us some more time to see where we are coming into the end of the year, right? So I'm not saying, you know, take from Peter to pay Paul, but I feel like it's not the best, certainly, but it is something that at least we can agree on. And when it comes to DI in the spring, maybe nobody goes, maybe every team they have, but at least we will have a little more insight into financially what we are looking like at the end of the year. And maybe we can be more creative, you know, at that point. It buys us a little bit of time, you know, certainly not the best, you know, piece for us, but
All right, let's take a vote on the 2,500 to get it off or on the table, okay?
Can I clarify, 2,500 total?
Yes. All right, all in favor of
I
2,500?
ask for a roll call.
You may.
Neil's second. Okay. Kristen?
No.
Wynn?
No,
Neil?
Yes.
Nick?
Yes.
Brian?
No.
Rob?
No.
Karen?
Yeah, abstain. Not sure
Carrie?
what I'm voting for.
No.
Betty?
No.
Scott?
No?
And Lisa?
No.
All right. 1.289 yes, 8.710 no.
All right, 2,500 is off the table. The 17,400 is back on the table. Brian,
And now, can I make my friendly
you may.
request? Reinstate what I had just said. At 50 per the 80 students comes out to 4,000, and that's what I would
I
request a
saw
friendly. for.
Sherry decline the friendly, so you need a second to your motion.
So you're asking for 4,000?
Yep.
Second.
Betty, go ahead.
Just for a point of reference, when a team wins a championship, we do $75 per kid. So I don't know if that,
6,000.
Can someone do the math? 75 times 80?
6,000.
All right, so we're at an amendment for 4,000. We have a second from Neil. Let's discuss the amendment for 4,000. In discussion, we've already learned that 6,000 is $75 per student. Rob?
Betty, I appreciate that, because that gives me some framework, but that's not what we're talking about. And not that you didn't win a championship in terms of dessert, we're talking about a special once-in-a-lifetime trip, which is the same as the trip that the DI kids go on. And so, I go back to, we're gonna have to, at some point, we're gonna have to figure out what the ratio was, or what the percentage was that we gave in comparison to the total trip, because if we don't, are we saying to the DI, to the band, your trip is less important than the DI trip? Because we're not willing to fund it to the same extent? 'Cause that's what it's gonna seem like.
All right, Karen, Scott, and then Nick.
Couple of things. If it's 4,000 and it was a $15,000 trip, that's 26%. But, I'm sorry, I'm getting lost in all this. So the 4,000 we're talking about is above and beyond anybody who might want to do the board stipend, or is that this including it? And are we making sure that we're not taking away from any teams and like any sporting events in the future? We're looking for just excess money, correct?
It is above and beyond,
Above and beyond.
and we can't account for how that's going to impact anyone else who would be taking money out of the student awards.
But as far as actual teams or events, it wouldn't be coming out of their line items.
No, just the awards. So if the football team were to go to state championship again, we would want to buy them jackets, and this is the only piece that it would impact. Scott?
So I think Rob's point is valid, but hard to quantify because year to year, we have not been consistent. So if you just look at last year's funding of the DI trip, we could look at that math, we could compare it to this situation, and we could probably come to some conclusion. But if you go back another year and go back to the year before that, and we've had kids having opportunities, and if you go back, say, 5 or 6 years, the last time the band took a large trip, I can't remember if the board supported that in some way or not. There hasn't been a logic to it mathematically the way you might be calling for. I think it's a worthwhile exercise, but I don't think we can do it and make it meaningful for this moment.
Nick, and then, I'm sorry, Kristen, you're next after Nick.
Again, I'm going to go back to where's the money coming from. We've already been told that they're kind of pinching pennies and being creative in how to properly staff the buildings as far as teachers and paras go. We're talking about making school improvements and having significant studies being done on the schools in order to assess values, get soil sampling, everything that surrounds that. We're talking about funding for our school security officer to receive certain training associated with that. So there's a lot of things that we're adding on here, and I'm in favor of all these things. They're great things, but you have to have the practical side of it too, and I'm not hearing that from anybody on this.
I don't want to diminish your question, but the funds will always come from student awards. It would be $4,000 out of student awards.
Right, so we have $7,500.
Yeah. And then if we only have the $3,500 left over, then your question applies to the next groups of students.
Well, I'm trying to be a little more proactive right now, because I could say, let's give him $7,500 right now, and then my question will apply to the next thing that comes up. And I don't think that's any way to properly manage.
Just for point of reference, so if we did fund DI at 23%, then funding this trip at 23% would be $21,160.
That was what my math came out to as well.
Yeah.
Just so, point of reference.
Okay. Brian?
I don't want to seem like any group is less important than the other, but I also don't want to get into the conversation that the money that we have set aside, that we budgeted in the student activity line, is specifically earmarked for DI.
It's not, no.
Right, so, but a lot of, I think, articulation to that conversation. So right now, we have a group in front of us that needs money, that has put a lot of time and effort in, and I'm not saying that any other group hasn't yet, but we're standing here trying to decide to take money from a line right now that we have money in. And we're not talking about spending all of it, a good portion of it, but we're also trying to decide to save money in case we need to spend it later at the same time, right? There is a need right now. We have money in that line, and I think at $50 a student is not an outrageous number, to request.
Let me ask, would this motion be a little bit softer if we said we will match up to $4,000 of any funds given between now and November 1st? Nick?
It still places Janelle in the same position where she has to come up with this money. It's going to be $4,000 out of that line, but thinking forward, is $3,500 sufficient for the rest of the year? Do you
It
feel
seems like it
comfortable?
might be, based on what we know right now. Karen?
To what Nick was saying, so if that's the line item that, for example, if football does go to states, because right now they're undefeated, but obviously they've been there before, at $75 times approximately 4 kids, that's $3,000 you're going to need for them. I don't know if that affects the
I'm going to
number.
call on Rob.
Thanks. Just a point of reference, I appreciate all the fairness talk and the percentages and things, but I'm in no way looking for a percentage of the trip paid by anyone or even per student necessarily. I'm just looking for some money that I can use as scholarship for these students that can't afford it as needed on a need-based basis.
And you said that's around 15,000.
There are 15 students that are less than half paid for the trip right now. That's correct.
Right, and the total of those kids, you figures was around 15,000?
Correct, yep.
Yeah.
All right, to restate, if we had the $4,000, which was brought forth by Brian, seconded by Neil, that $4,000 would be used towards scholarships.
Move
for
the
students
question,
in
roll
need.
call.
I didn't have any hands. Neil has called the question. Jeremy?
I think I need some clarification on what it is we're voting on at this point.
The $4,000. $4,000.
Kristen?
Pass.
Win?
No.
Neil?
Yes.
Nick?
No.
Brian?
Yes.
Rob?
No.
Karen?
Abstain.
Sherry?
No.
Betty?
No.
Scott?
No.
Lisa?
No.
Karen? Excuse me, Kristen?
No.
2.196 yes, 7.803 no.
We're back to the original motion.
We're back to the original motion, that's right, for $17,400.
Neil keeps talking about surpluses.
Every year, we have a surplus.
Where's that money go?
That money goes back to the voters.
If it's not allocated.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, you may.
Have you turned in the MS-25 yet?
No.
We would know what it was for this year if she had.
Yeah. However, the surplus for last year can't be touched. We can't do anything to make a motion against last year's surplus. All we can do is make a motion against the 18-19 surplus.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Betty?
Would you accept a friendly amendment to 15,000?
I would accept a friendly to 15.
I'll accept that too.
What was the friendly amendment, please?
15,000.
Change the 17,000 to 15,000, because that's what Rob
So-
says he needs for scholarship money.
What's your rationale?
Because Rob said he needs 15,000 for scholarship money for kids that don't have enough, anywhere near enough in their account.
Nick?
And what line item is this supposed to come out of?
I'd have to sit and look at the budget.
So we don't even know where the money's coming from. We're just gonna say, Janelle, give him 15,000.
I'll ask again. Half of 15,000 is 7,500. We know that much is sitting in in student awards. What if we said that we would match up to 7,500?
You mean for fundraising?
Right.
In 2 weeks? They need
Who
to get
knows? I mean, they still need money
$7,500?
after the 2 weeks, so.
Rob, do you have I'm sorry.
Karen?
Can we ask, do you have an estimate of what you think you'll make this weekend at the conference?
I haven't been told. They said the more volunteers I could get, the better off I would be. And right now I have 47 kids signed up and 4 adults, which is pretty good on 2 days' notice.
All right, so actually, how much is Monadnock Pumpkin Festival going to pay you for those 47 kids?
We have not reached an agreement on that yet. It's not contracted necessarily. I would imagine it's based on what they're making, but I don't know. At this point, it's just like, it's a good fundraising opportunity, or
Yeah.
it's something we can do. So we have to take that. I feel like it's my responsibility to make sure that option's there for the kids.
Do you anticipate any large revenue items that will be paid this week or next week?
No, all of our big fundraising opportunities that I've organized for the past several months have concluded at this point.
Okay, I think I had Scott and then Rob.
Janelle, do you know what the current balance in the gate receipts fund is? I'm thinking there's a lot of people who come to see the band and
And we're paying.
the football.
But they stay in the stands to watch the band.
Yeah, I don't have that total. I can certainly bring it. I know that doesn't help you tonight, but I don't have that.
And we don't know what's in student activity accounts either, which is another possibility.
Members of the board, I don't see us scheduling a special meeting just to learn these facts. I think we have to go on what we know right now, tonight. Any other discussion? All right, we're voting on 15,000 then.
Even?
Is there an account that's, I'm sorry,
Just trying to read your face.
shall I go?
Do we need
You
to
may.
know where this money's coming from?
We don't.
No? We
Is
just say,
there an account
We're not
for field
required to know
trips?
where it's coming from.
can I put in a couple million for new wing expansion on a school?
Make a
I'll
motion.
vote no, but,
I want to hear from Betty because I cut her off.
no, I was just asking if there was an account for field trips.
That's built into the elementary school budgets. It's entirely different line
Oh,
item.
it's not secondary as well, it's just the elementaries? Okay.
I think it's $3 per student or something.
Yeah, it's very small.
It's like $3 per kid.
Yeah.
All right, so we're voting on 15,000. This will be roll call.
There you go, Win.
Sorry, I haven't paid attention to you.
Kristen,
Yes.
Wynn,
Yes.
Karen Wheeler?
I think I should recuse myself.
going with abstain or no vote?
No, that's a
That's a
recuse,
no
which means that.
I mean, that's
It's a
nothing.
negative,
Okay.
right? It's like nothing.
Thank you, I just wanted to
Not,
make sure.
no,
I was
not
clear.
yes. No, it's nothing.
Conflict.
Well, when you recuse yourself, it subtracts from the 13 vote total.
Yes.
Different from its abstaining.
Right, that's what I was just clarifying, that it wasn't, I doesn't go in as an abstention. Neil?
Call it again.
Did you ask me?
Yes.
No.
Nick?
No.
Brian?
No.
Rob?
Yes.
Karen?
Abstain.
Sherry?
Yes.
Betty?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
And Lisa?
Abstain.
6.591 yes, 2.410 no, 2.119 abstain, and 1.8.
You are welcome, my friend.
Thank you, and thank you for considering all that, and I know that wasn't easy, so thank you very much, and we'll certainly do our best to make you proud. Thank you.
Do our best to find the money.
One last question, Rob. How did the Dover Band show go?
Oh, everything went very well. It was good momentum coming from a great football game Friday night with a good crowd, and everything went very well on Saturday, so thank you.
Nick?
I'd like to have an update from Janelle maybe on the next board meeting as far as where we're getting the money and what line items it's coming from.
Again, I mean, I don't know if next meeting will be a good time for me to be able to give you that answer, because it's pretty early in the year to be determining where we might have surpluses. I mean, I agree that we have had significant surpluses in prior years, but I don't know where those might be this year.
Well, I'm assuming if you have to perform the basic accounting in order to expend those funds, you're gonna, next month, November 1st, you're gonna have to take them from somewhere.
Well, right.
Sorry.
He's feeding me words.
I'm mad at myself.
We're moving on to developing the warrant articles.
No, we would just overexpend that line until we can find out where to take it from.
Okay.
All right, and we have historically had warrant articles, if I can do this by memory, it's been number 1 for the total budget, number 2 for the building, default budget, right?
No, the default budget is in the,
In number 1.
yeah.
Number 2 for our facilities improvements, number 3 for health and safety, number 4 has been traditionally, I want to say for any surplus to be added to the special education fund. 5 has been any surplus to be added to the fuel fund. So where do we want to start with our warrant articles now?
Isn't Janelle going to give us a sample? Like the predecessor?
Is there anything that's really pressing for right this moment that we need to start thinking about? Scott has pulled up the ballot for last year.
Finance meets next week, so I know that we're going to begin discussing all of that, if that's
Do you
helpful.
feel like finance is going to come up with the building improvements warrant article and then also the health and safety warrant article?
I feel Dave has a good idea of the health and safety. I feel he's unsure what to do in terms of the building because of how facilities has been up in the air with all of the different options. That's just my feeling, not to put words into Dave's mouth, but I feel that he would be able to at least do the health and safety.
All right, let's get the skeleton now. 1 is budget and default budget. 2,
It's usually been the big
Renovation.
renovation, if there is one.
Right.
and you expect you will have a reno, right? 3 is
It's been safety improvements.
safety, yeah.
Or 4 has been before and after school. Expendable trust.
safe to call that ACES for now.
Yep. Number 5 last year was the expendable trust for special education.
Which I believe we didn't put any money in last year.
Right.
Only $1 to keep it open.
Right.
Sorry, this is a sample. There we go. 6 has been,
And ACES wasn't.
we're going to have 2 contracts this year, so 6 and 7 will be MDEA and MESA.
And
And are
generally
we
what
in
we
agree-
do.
Sorry.
Generally, what we've done with contracts is whomever turns whatever union turns the contract in
That's
first is
exactly what I
listed
was going to
first.
say first. So whoever turns theirs in first to us will go
First on the ballot.
first on the ballot.
Good
Right.
to know.
Next would be agents and auditors. Next would be opinions of an advisory nature.
That's why I was here last month.
And then after that, any unique,
Yeah.
Any petition article, petition stuff.
We came close to eliminating the opinions one last year, but I think it stayed on, yeah?
it did. I mean, we have it as policy. But
And what was the one that was eliminated last year that we had on traditionally?
Did we end up taking?
it might have been that
We
one. This
we
is a
still have
sample.
agents and auditors, and we still have the opinions.
Oh, I thought we had removed one of them last year for some reason.
I think we discussed it.
Yeah, I think we discussed it.
Okay.
So do we know, not to ask a hard question, but is the facilities team planning to propose any warrant articles for funds for studies or anything like that?
The facilities committee, at this point, I've started putting a paper together, and most likely the board will receive a packet. I don't see facilities coming to a conclusion.
A unified.
A unified conclusion, correct. I think we've done great work, and I think we've done great research, but I don't see us coming forward with a warrant article at this time. And that's, again, my own opinion, but
All right, not even a warrant article to propose future studies,
Right, I thought.
that may be.
which we
That
would
could
draw
be.
the
Yeah, that's what
building
I thought.
appraisals.
That could be.
Use a space holder there.
We're torn on that as well. Whether that should be included in the budget or a separate warrant article. I think the committee's divided on that as well.
Maybe we can settle that now.
I don't know, that would be a tough one, but we can go. I can get my notes out, we can.
By nature of a warrant article,
I mean, I think it might make most sense. Facilities meets next week, and I have a feeling that would come forward to the board the following meeting.
Right.
so by nature of having a warrant article in that space, if, say, we were to say, let's raise $5 in order to conduct further studies, if the voters were to vote down the warrant article, that limits us.
No means no.
No means no, right? Whereas if we identify a way to include it in either default or proposed budget, those are just budgets.
That's exactly where the facilities is with that idea.
All right, let me ask this. If we were to come up with a warrant article for funding formula, where would it fit? Budget and default budget, reno, safety, and then studies for buildings, ACES, SPED.
Does it matter?
I think that
Sometimes it
that's a
does.
question for Janelle, because I don't know how that works. I know that there's only so much we can do above, like 10% above or whatnot, the existing budget. I don't know how that works with funding formulas.
So funding formulas, we can place anywhere in the order that we would like to.
Didn't we vote on
And
it?
it won't matter.
It only goes so far down,
It
Karen. then
matters in
doesn't.
as far as that last year and the year before, we saw it, once people started checking no, they went right down the line, no.
It's optics.
Yeah.
Is it okay if we have that discussion in finance next week?
Ryan?
So the warrants have to be in on what date,
December 12th?
right? So I don't see us, we haven't even started a discussion on funding formula. I can't even imagine we would be anywhere near close to putting anything together about funding formula for a warrant if we're talking less than 6 weeks. to do that. In my opinion, that's a null point for this time around.
But I thought the whole thing was if we don't and something goes on by petition, that seals our ability to do it for 5 more years.
If it passes.
No.
If it passes.
I'm sorry, if it goes on by petition and it passes, that's right. So we could have Article 1, budget and default, Article 2, renovations, Article 3, health and safety, Article 4, studies for facilities, Article 5, funding formula, 6, ACES, 7, SPED, 8, the MDEA contract, 9, MESA, 10 and 11 auditors and opinions, and then after that, any petition warrant articles.
I don't agree with, I don't think you've got to vote here on some of those items, like the funding formula.
We're going to vote on the continuum of the warrant articles.
Right, but you're putting it on the list of things that we're supposed to.
How would you get the warrant thing on the list, is always asking? How'd you get that warrant on the list of warrants?
I wrote it down because it's something under serious
You
discussion.
understand, but what he's saying is you gotta vote them on.
Right.
Each
So-
one will be, and if one were to fail, then the list would collapse.
Right, but you don't get to just put it on the list.
You don't get to do that yourself. It's
You
the
can
school
propose the
board.
warrant.
No, right now, we're voting on the continuum of the warrant articles. Is this how we would like for them to appear? And then we put pressure on the different groups to develop the warrant articles that we expect.
Yeah, I don't agree with that process.
Okay. Betty?
So are you saying you want us to vote on each warrant?
Well, if you're gonna add,
Warrant one, yes or no?
add a warrant to
Up or
change the
down,
budget, don't you
instead of
think we're
as a
gonna vote?
block?
Yeah, I think that
I
we
move
need,
I move we add a budget modification on the warrant article. I need a
Karen.
second so we can vote on it.
Wait, is there a second?
I'm not sure what
I don't know what it, I don't know.
Clarity of what that does.
To say it's gonna be on there or not.
Neil, I hear you, and we will vote on them one by one. Karen?
I personally feel that the tax should be lower down underneath the contracts. And I would also make a motion that we take this information and table it until finance meets next week.
So you want to talk about this at our next board meeting, which is the first
Correct.
Tuesday?
No,
in
it's
December.
going to be a Wednesday.
We moved it to
yes.
Wednesday because it's,
We changed it due to the election.
Right.
Jeremy had his hand up.
Is that on the agenda now, the 7th?
It's already been approved.
Well, did we approve moving it to Cutler?
We didn't approve moving it to Cutler, and we don't have to.
We're gonna take that off, right? And still have the meeting here?
No, we don't have to approve moving it to Cutler.
Well, it says on the Cutler on your, I cut mine off and hung it on the light, but if somebody's got the back page of the agenda, it says it's gonna be at Cutler.
So we can have it at Cutler.
I don't want it at Cutler, I
It
would like
doesn't
to.
need board approval. It does not need a board
Well, I'll
approval.
make a motion to say not at Cutler.
Is there a
The only
second?
thing I heard well at
Second
Cutler
the
last
table.
time was that you wanted to throw me out of
Right.
there. The
So,
acoustics is terrible.
So a motion to
gonna-
table is non-debatable.
motion to table till November 7th for the
Karen.
continuum of the warrant articles.
Second.
Well, where are we gonna have that meeting?
The second was by Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
I only heard 3 ayes. We should probably do
Didn't know
a
what-
roll call.
what were we voting on?
We're tabling the continuum
Didn't
of
ask
the
for
warrant
those.
articles until November 7th, next meeting.
Discussion on it.
You didn't ask for those. you
There's no
only asked for
discussion on
yays.
a motion to table.
It's, this is a motion to table the discussion on the,
Right,
Right.
I'm sorry.
Well, then there is no discussion. Table. Assuming you didn't add to the 7th on there.
Right, there's no motion on the table, I suppose, but at the same time, I feel this should be tabled until finance discusses it next week.
All right, so if someone fails to make a motion on the current continuum that I proposed, we'll just stop discussion. You can say, call the question. And then we will effectively talk about it on 11/7. Neil, you want to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we have the 11/7 meeting right here.
Is there a second?
Second.
What's the discussion on that?
So your feeling, Neil, is that it's just hard to, it's difficult to hear there?
The acoustics is terrible, other than trying to throw me out of the room.
Excuse me, Neil, I didn't mean to.
So 11/7 is the board meeting?
11/7 is a Wednesday,
moved
it's the
out
board
because of the-
meeting.
Right, because of the voting.
But it
Yeah,
says
I don't, is there any possibility for microphones in that room?
Jeremy says yes.
Somebody's going to use this? Somebody's using this on voter day?
I don't know.
Then we'll use it.
We're not
I'm completely confused right now.
On the, if you got,
Neil.
Not the,
if you got an agenda on the second page, it says it's at Cutler.
Scott?
we
So
got a motion to table.
I
We're
understand
talking.
Neil's motion to be that because the acoustics at Cutler are challenging, he would prefer that we meet in this atmosphere. Now, we have a tradition to get out to every school at least once a year in the interest of encouraging the community to come out and attend a meeting. I realize it's only across town when it comes to Cutler,
Yeah.
but there is a value to getting out to every school. That's the debate, the acoustics of that facility versus our tradition of getting out into every building.
Could I just qualify that a little bit? I thought they were moving it. Swansea has an awful lot of meetings already. They don't need to be closer. If the kids have some sort of pitch, I'd be more than willing to go. But that hasn't happened in about 4 or 5 years.
Didn't we have a motion to table?
Yes, we did.
There's a lot
We
of
voted
talk.
No,
on
no, the motion to table fell off because there was no motion to table.
There is no motion on the floor to table.
Okay.
Brian has his.
Does that make sense? Brian?
Yes, it does.
As a Swansea member, I'm absolutely fine keeping it here.
I'd prefer it.
How do we feel about doing Cutler on the 20th?
Fine with me.
Karen?
I just wanted to add that we did have a school tour of Cutler that all the board members were
somebody
invited
gonna
to.
have to come out.
It was a while ago now, but we did do that school tour. So, and then also I see that there's 2 other committees that are meeting ahead of the board meeting, and they're both scheduled for the SAU.
All right, so the motion is to move the board meeting to the library on the 7th, and those 2 committee meetings that you just referenced are happening
At
At the
5:30
SAU.
and 6:30 at the SAU.
All right.
So, not to distract, but Lillian reminded me that we still have our standard first Wednesday of the month policy and EC meeting scheduled, so we, as committees, have to decide if we're going to move.
Right.
They're not meant to conflict with the board meeting, it's just we
Right.
forgot to reschedule those.
I just thought I'd point that out. If 2 other committees are meeting potentially at the SAU, then
So the motion is to move the meeting of the 7th to here in the library. All right, do we have?
And then, did you say something about then holding the meeting on the 20th at Cutler?
We could take that as a friendly amendment?
Because I think Neil's point is valid if he needs an accommodation, so he can do the meeting. Unless we can make it so people can hear in that room. I don't know.
Jeremy said that we can set up a PA system for that room.
There is microphones in there. There are 8 microphones. They need to be shared and passed around. There are speakers, and we can test it ahead of time and make sure that we can hear it. You know, if you want us to put the energy into making sure that's totally 100% ready to go, we will absolutely do that for you.
That'd be a good thing to do for the 20th.
And then having until the 20th to make sure
Yep.
would be beneficial.
Yep. I don't know. Did we only have like 3 mics out last year or something? Was that the problem?
That's part of the problem, but the
Yeah.
other problem is that when you're using microphones and the speakers are pointed at the audience, they may be able to
Yeah,
hear
right,
it,
it's a
but
gym.
we can't hear each other, and you can't point the speakers at each other, you'll just get feedback from those microphones. It's just a very challenging room to host a meeting.
Troy and Emerson the same.
Yes.
All right, so the motion we're voting on is to move our meeting of the 7th to the library. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Is there a follow-up motion for the 21st, the 20th?
I thought that was a friendly.
Is that were we scheduled to be here on the 20th?
We were scheduled to be
Well, you
here
chose
on the
to schedule.
20th,
Yeah.
and we
And
will
I'd
be
make that
missing.
motion to reschedule Cutler to the 20th.
All right, is there a second? That, Neil?
I'll
Neil?
second it, but could I amend it? If the kids don't have anything to present, we can move it back here.
No, I think we need to visit
It's another meeting in
anyways.
Swansea. Why do we need another place in Swansea?
I've never been there, so I'd like to go.
Yeah, and parents from that area might come to some Cutler. And,
Write that down. Look at that crowd. That's who's gonna be there.
Well, you don't know.
We went to Emerson a lot.
All right, we're moving around. Karen, did you
Can
have
we add
something?
that, I mean, do we know if the gym is available? I mean, don't they
Yeah.
start sports at Cutler? Basketball?
Jeremy?
What about the availability for Cutler? When do the basketballs and?
I have no idea. I have to, their calendar's not posted yet, so I can reach out to Audrey tomorrow and find out if that's even possible, or if that room's already scheduled for sports of any kind.
That's my own-
Basketball doesn't start until after
Basketball
Christmas.
starts in December generally,
Yeah.
because soccer is just wrapping
Principals
up.
used to come to this meeting.
They were at the last one. They come to the first one.
They might be practicing basketball, and not to be a hard nose, but sometimes the school board meeting gets precedence over basketball practice, not always over basketball games.
There won't be any games in November.
Yeah. So the motion is to move the school board meeting for the 20th to Cutler, if Cutler is available.
Second.
Sounds good.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, so that passes. I got the motion from Karen. This sounds good from Neil.
What's that?
That was your second.
11.
Number 3.
All right.
Thank you.
Sorry. Moving along.
To number 3.
The building appraisals. We've had some discussion on this already, and we did have discussion at the last meeting. I think facilities is taking this under their wing as well. It is possible that building appraisals might move under a warrant article for this coming year. So we'll start there for our discussion, and then if there is a motion to be made for this evening, so be it. Does anyone need a reminder where we left off? Building appraisals were, if I'm not mistaken, about $8,500 per building. And the total was,
I think you've got it.
It's
28.
I thought it was
2,000 something.
You said 8,000.
28, okay.
Karen,
So 2,800 times 6 building. It was no small amount of money.
It's a lot of money.
And we were trying to determine whether we should spend that amount of money out of some fund balance that we're not quite sure of yet, or should we
Seems to be a
figure?
trend.
So where is the money coming from? That's where we're at. If we're gonna spend it now, where does the money come from? If not from a warrant article asking the taxpayers for the money. Neil?
I think this is premature. I think facilities ought to put that in the discussion, whether we even have, try to get money now, or in a warrant, or in the budget. I think that's the 3 choices we have. And there was nobody here to help Rob with the background on that last meeting, so.
All right, now warrant or budget? Does anyone want to make a motion on now, or from a warrant, or in the budget?
I would make a motion to place it on a warrant, because this is an item that needs
the table.
voter approval.
Move the table.
I want to
I'll
hear
withdraw
from
my
Karen
motion.
first. I heard you, Neil, but I want to hear from Karen first.
I would withdraw my motion.
Okay.
I think this is going to be again next week at the, both probably finance and facilities meetings that are occurring next Tuesday. And the other thing that had been discussed at the last facilities meeting was, again, a feasibility study and how much that may cost, and if that should be rolled in with the appraisals, or if that would be part of the study. So I think we were looking to gather some of that information. So I would propose we discuss this at the next board meeting.
All right, so Neil, you moved to table, and we heard from Karen, so when do you want to table it?
You want to do it with a motion to move it to the next meeting, or just table it?
But we need to table
We don't-
it with a
we-
date specific.
Well, we don't have a motion on the floor.
Point of information, what is the feasibility study that you're talking about?
Yeah, so what we had discussed and what Janelle had mentioned was a feasibility study would likely look at different options, and it would be an outside person that would come in and look at several of the options we've discussed, which frankly, I started compiling a list, and we've discussed upwards of over 10 options.
This is building schools, closing schools, all right.
Yeah, and it would take into consideration towns, communities, aging buildings, all of the things and items that the committee has collected over the past 6 months, which I think we have done as a committee an outstanding job getting the information together. But we're kind of at that point where it's like, okay, here we are, warrant articles,
All right.
where to go.
So, Neil, you moved to table, and you and I both missed it. There was no motion to table at that time, so I think.
Well, he started to make a motion, I wanted to get rid of it, so I tabled it.
No, but I didn't get a second.
Then you can rule my motion to table inadequate or
I
something.
think what we'll do is we'll just, I rule the motion to table out of order.
There you go.
And I think we'll just put this on the next agenda, okay?
Yeah, I
Fine,
think that
whatever
would
way you want to do it.
Hockey funding. It's all you, my friend.
All right. I have a copy of the April 17 minutes, just the one page that is pertinent. So I don't know if people want to reread this. I can pass it around. But basically, we need to know what we're doing for hockey this year. At this year's April 17th, 2018 meeting, there was the motion to fund the hockey team at 100%. That was amended to fund the hockey in a similar manner to other sports. The motion was moved and it was passed. And then we made another motion to fund the hockey team in the amount of up to $20,000 from any excess funds from the 2017-2018 unallocated fund balance. That motion was passed, but then later ruled as out of order.
because there's no exact amount.
Because there was no exact amount or contract amount, as Janelle put out. But we do still have the motion that was passed that says we will pay for hockey in a similar manner to other sports.
Which one have you added in the budget?
But it isn't in the budget, so we need to let them know what they need to, if fundraising needs to happen, or if this still stands. And at the extracurricular activities committee meeting, we weren't exactly sure and wanted to bring it to the full board, because as I read it, it looks like we are funding hockey, but.
All right, Nick.
Just like to point out, this is a continuing trend, just under discussion on the main body of this page. Elwood asked where the funds would come from. So I think, again, we need to have an understanding of how we're going to pay for this. We're proposing lots and lots of stuff and not coming up with any solution. It's irresponsible just to tell administration, hey, you guys find the money.
But I think, can I speak?
Yes, you may.
I think Kristen's point is well taken. This was supposed to be put in the budget. We had voted to put that in the budget.
on April 17, 2018,
For the following year.
the next year.
And we
Yeah,
haven't
that's
seen
next
a
year.
preliminary budget for
Again,
next year.
You need to see it in the budget, which is going to come out in November.
But what about this year's hockey?
I thought we covered that.
Well, I can remember, we
upcoming.
let them keep the gate receipts, but I can't remember funding
Did
anything
something
else.
for them.
Huh?
We voted sometime either this year, I'm sure, or
This year it was
To-
keep the
to
gate
make up the
receipts, and
difference,
next year it
particularly
was
ice
put it in the budget.
No, the gate receipts were for last year to help with ice time for last season. This season, this vote was to pay for it. It can't be in the budget because the budget was approved in January or February, whenever March was the actual vote. And when we prepare the budget for the 1920 school year, if this is here, then we'll add that to the budget for the 1920 for you to see. But the
We
gate
left-
receipt thing was to pay off the ice time for the last season.
We left this season in limbo.
We left this season in limbo.
Yeah,
So this says we gave you 20,000.
Well, that was ruled out of order
Where?
because we couldn't, later on in another meeting, sorry, I did not,
okay.
I didn't print out everything. I don't know if that original motion doesn't have a date on it. It sounds to me that we already approved funding hockey in the same manner that we fund other sports.
That was my understanding.
Yeah. So
But
for
what
this
is
year.
here? Janelle?
My question is, what does that mean, in the same manner that we fund other sports? Because some other sports pay for certain things for themselves out of their boosters. So hockey has something different than other sports have. Like, they have to pay for ice time, whereas other sports don't have to do something similar to that. So it's very ambiguous.
The
What do you
conversation-
mean?
Yeah, the conversation, remember Tom Cody was here, the conversation essentially was that they're paying just to complete their season. They're not paying for, when the boosters get active in other sports, my understanding, I could be wrong, they're not paying for, they may upgrade the bus that the team travels to go to a certain place, but we provide basic ability to operate a season, whatever that means, right? Hockey is its own animal in terms of more expensive, but I think the understanding that we came to was the ability to operate and complete a season. Anything extra and over, they would have to pay. So for example, if they wanted a second stick or a third stick, I'm making this up off the top of my head, in terms of extras. But my recollection of that meeting was their ability to complete a season.
Karen W., then Karen B.
So I feel like the confusion is, we have a motion from this meeting, April 17th, and it says move to fund the hockey team in the amount of up to $20,000 from any excess fund balance, excuse me, from the 2017-18 unallocated fund balance. And later then we discussed at a later meeting that it may not be a valid motion because in order to take from the surplus, you need to have an exact amount. And since we did not have an exact amount, we're in this situation where, hockey may feel as if they're funded. But I don't know if this motion is a valid motion to take from surplus when we don't have.
We can't, not only is it not an exact amount, but like Kristen was saying, you need to have a contract to
Right.
be able to encumber money
Encumber
from one
funds.
year to the next.
And it was something that came up in finance and then was brought up forward to the board. So, and then it kind of was in limbo. So I understand where the hockey's coming from because what do we do with that motion? We can't fund the hockey team in the amount of $20,000 from excess funds from this past budget. So, and we can't add them into the budget because that's already been passed. We're running on a default budget. So what do we do at this point is where I'm seeing
Right.
the problem.
Karen. I'm sorry, Betty.
Yeah. Yeah, that door is closed, the 17-18, that closed on July 1st.
That's what she's saying. She's also saying to do that, we would like, say, the hockey team went to the hockey rink and said, what's next year's bill? They gave you a bill, you could do it that way, right?
Well, we had already discussed that we couldn't do, that this motion, the $20,000 motion was out of order and that we couldn't do it. That isn't really my question. It's kind of like how we just said we would give the band a certain amount of money. So that's what we're doing. The first motion is saying we will give hockey, we will fund them. That's what we're doing. And we just added on to it that this is where the money will come from. What we just did earlier in this meeting was say, find the money. And basically this motion to me is saying, find the money, and we tried to give an out by saying with surplus, which didn't work. So my question is, are we still, does that first motion stand? We know the second motion doesn't stand. Does the first motion stand in that we are funding hockey for this season?
Yeah, why don't we be like negative 30 grand in the awards fund?
But if it has already passed,
Right.
there's nothing, I just want clarification.
I
It's
think our
already
intent
passed,
that
we fund
paid
them.
for them.
Yeah, we'll have to get rid of a para.
It makes, it is a big difference, though, you got to admit, to take 20,000 out of last year's, what did we forecast, $1 million? I can't remember what number.
It'll
But
be,
we knew there would be a surplus. So we would take, we don't know there's going to be a surplus now. I would bet there'll be a surplus, but we don't know it as well as we knew on April 17th that there was going to be one. So I think it's a heck of a difference.
I guess I'm just a little confused, and I want to make sure we're all on the same page. So what I see is motion from Scott Peters, move to fund the hockey team at 100%, and there was a second. Then during the discussion, there was a friendly amendment to that motion to fund hockey in a similar manner to other sports. But then there's no reconciliation of that motion, and then there's another motion after that
To amend.
that says Neil Moretti moved to amend the motion. So I guess it's another amendment
Yep.
to the, so it was amended twice.
Mhm.
To amend the motion to pay the cost for the girls to play on the Keene hockey team. And there was another second. That amendment passed. And then there was a motion to fund the hockey in the amount of up to $20,000 from excess funds. But we're saying that motion is effectively invalid because we didn't have, a paperwork, a contract, and a bill.
That's right.
So I honestly don't see us having a motion to fund hockey this upcoming season, and I'm not saying that that's fair. I don't feel that's fair. But I don't think we ever actually had a motion that passed that said we would fund hockey in a similar manner, because there was 2 amendments after that, and what passed was the amendments, not the original motion.
What I see as a parliamentary error, there shouldn't have been 2 amendments.
I agree
right.
with that.
And when it says motion passes, we were effectively voting on both of the amendments.
It's bolt-ons.
Yeah. We were voting on to fund hockey in a similar manner and
See,
also cost for girls to play.
Honestly, I take that differently, but that I wasn't at this meeting. So I'm just saying, me looking at this, not being at this meeting, I don't feel that amendment, the first amendment passed. I only feel the second amendment passed, which was to pay for the cost of girls to play on the Keene hockey team. And again, I wasn't at this meeting, so I'm just going off of what's written here.
I was there, I feel like I remember that our intent was for both of the amendments to pass. Kristen and then Neil. I'm sorry, Nick.
I remember because it was one of my first meetings, and I actually voted against to fund because there was absolutely no discussion about where we would get the money. So I actually asked, I said, well, where does the money come from? And they said, we tell them to find it. And after all those motions passed, and that was the feeling that I got, then Eric made the motion, oh, by the way, let's take the money out of here and do that. So to me, it may be parliamentary incorrect, but it looks like it passes. I can see my no vote right there. It went past. And then, so I feel like the funding did pass. That's how everyone seemed to be on board. And then there was a pause, and Eric brought this other motion to encumber funds that we couldn't do.
Right, it was Nick and then Karen.
I remember a lot of discussion about, again, where the funds are going to come from. And again, I remember Lisa, our superintendent, saying where the funds going to come from. And then at the end, we had voted to fund the hockey team out of unallocated funds at the end of the year. That's what, from my memory, that's what I remember.
That's all I remember too.
Right, so I think where we stand is that we passed both of the amendments. And then we found that our resolution to the two amendments was not appropriate. Right. Brian?
So my question, I'm good with the intent, and I'm not saying I agree or disagree. I voted no, but I want to be clear on, does the motion stand or not? And that's the question,
That's the
right?
question.
Process,
Well, yeah, that's the question
is it,
he's
are
asking.
we yay or nay, and do we need to start over and have another discussion?
The
Right.
motion stands, and we still have no idea where the money's coming from. Karen W., and then Karen B., and then Winston.
So reading this, again, I wasn't at the meeting. Personally, I feel like the motion to pay for the girls to play at the Keene hockey team, on the Keene hockey team passed. And after that, I don't know, I don't see anything that passed. I don't feel personally, reading this, that both of those passed. I also feel that it sounded like the board wanted to pay for the hockey team for this past year. Unfortunately, the motion wasn't a valid motion, but I do feel if the board supported that, we shouldn't let the hockey team down, and that we should discuss what we want to do going forward. But that's just my personal opinion.
I'd like to hear this.
And I also feel like, as Janelle said, it's very, to fund the hockey team in a similar manner to other sports is so broad that how are we going to give Janelle this information and be like, oh yeah, do it like the other ones? That's, I mean, that's so
Apples and oranges.
ambiguous. Yeah, I mean, I don't know.
The intent was without expecting a parent contribution to the playing and transportation.
But do other sports pay for that? I feel like some do. I mean, goes back to conversations we've had for years where we haven't seen a list. Like, are we paying for all the other clubs
We're
to have
paying for
transportation?
uniforms and transportation. We're
Because
paying for
it's a
field
varsity
time.
sport now.
Uniforms, transportation,
It's a
and field
varsity
time is the
sport now.
responsibility for other sports, but
I guess my point is with this motion is what's fair isn't always equal, and what's equal isn't always fair. And I feel like that motion, personally, it doesn't look like it passed. I do think we need to have further discussion on it, like Kristen said. But I don't see how we can tell Janelle to put this in the budget and like really know what that amount of money would be.
You guys, baseball fans.
all right, so we can have a motion to clarify the intent of the previous motion. We can say that the intent was to pay for uniforms, transportation, field time, and refs. Neil?
Don't you think we ought to get the
You
attorney's opinion on what this says, seeing as that failed?
Janelle?
I'm completely lost on where this is, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
I know the money went away.
Keep skipping
Go ahead,
Karen.
Yeah, Karen.
Karen was in line a while.
Oh, right. Let Karen go, because she was in line.
All right, Karen.
Sorry.
So I know this is back in April, and we're looking at money, and there's a line here that says there's a balance of $30,000 in the gate receipt account, and I know it's been a few months. Do we know, I mean, who would know the answer to the balance of what's in the gate receipt? Because it seems as though the 15,000 we're looking for band, and probably 15 to 20 we're looking for hockey, is sitting right here unless there's been a large withdrawal
That's a
from
good
that.
point.
Okay, I have a question about that. I don't know whether we take gate receipts for hockey, but I think I have
We do, sorry.
Yeah, they do.
They do,
Okay.
they do take it.
Is it
Neil
one-
and then
one
Janelle.
fund?
Yeah, all goes
Nick, I'm sorry.
That's what I'm saying, so they are contributing.
I think this is a really good example of what happens when we don't properly plan and budget for these activities and people just throw out spending without having a source from which the money's going to come from. So I'm kind of just sitting back and watching this implode, unfortunately. And really, the people that are impacted the most are the students,
Right.
who are let down when things like this happen.
Right.
Because you can't plan and spend and budget in this fashion by just throwing stuff out in a board meeting and saying, find the money, we'll find it at the end of the year, we'll find it from this line item. It's inappropriate and it's irresponsible to behave this way.
Guys, I'll take full responsibility for this. I had a 9-day-old baby at the time. There was a parliamentary error that happened. Let's just try to unravel it if we could, and let's do the right thing for the hockey team. I'm just asking for your grace in this. Janelle?
I did pull up the revolving athletic fund gate receipt account. It is athletic, it's not for band, just to clarify that. It looks like we have about 15,000, a little under 15,000 in that account. We did purchase 3 new scoreboards over the summer because ours were getting a little ratty, so some of that money was spent that you knew was in there. So that answers that account, that question. And then also, hockey has been under the impression that they've had to fund their own program, and I believe they currently have about between $15,000 and $16,000 in their student activity account that I would imagine they were intending to use for the upcoming season. So I don't know if we want to involve, or the board wants to involve, or the extracurricular committee wants to involve them in the conversation at some point, what they, feel like they should fund.
All right, Kristen and then Karen.
I know that at our extracurricular activities committee meeting, Tom stated that he thought that the hockey would be funded. He was told by administration at the end of last season that he should send out an email to the parents saying that hockey was funded after the meeting where we said. So he was told by administration to tell the parents that it's funded. From what I gathered from our extracurriculars.
Well, that's exactly what I was
Yeah.
looking for.
And that was my understanding too, to fund in a similar manner. I thought that passed.
Yeah. And looking at this that we got from Tom a while ago that says the expenditures of each different athletic whatever. So football was, the total expenditures is $40,675. Basketball last year was $51,596, and ice hockey was $26,796. So similar manner.
Nick?
I think it's very important that you look at per capita expenditure on that.
And it's on.
So we have a very large, from my understanding, basketball program, both boys and girls, and we also have JV. So you have to look at the spending per student.
Yeah,
and
that's true.
And it's dramatically different when you look at hockey compared to any other sport that we have here.
Jeremy and then Karen?
Just to clarify a couple things. We do actually have money in the budget for hockey that we've always had, and the board upped it a few years ago. It was $8,000, I believe it's up to $15,000, which pays for refs, and I believe a lot of the uniforms, parents supply skates and sticks. And I might not be 100% correct on that, but I believe I am. The big thing that was in question was the ice time, which is about the ice fees, which is about $16,000, which is what they had.
Mm-hmm.
The gate receipts were used to pay the ice time for last season, so that's why that money is still available there, because they didn't use their booster money to pay for the ice time because the gate receipts paid for ice time last year. So the district does fund some of hockey already. So it's not the total expense of that 26,000 isn't the total that would need to be raised this year differently, just to clarify.
Thank you.
All right, Karen and then Winston.
As far as expenses, unless things have changed, the students or parents pay for every bit of equipment, as opposed to football where the only thing parents are buying are cleats. So with hockey, I think in that budget is like pucks and stuff, but as far as.
Yeah, and
any-
jerseys.
Jerseys, right, and
Yeah.
the uniforms are new and they're not gonna be neat. But actually, those uniforms are played by the boosters.
Oh, right.
They were promised, sorry. I'm not there anymore. But it ended up coming out of the boosters' money. So that wasn't actually even funded by the school. And there was a set amount, like you said, I think it was 8 and it doubled to 16. And there's still a fair amount of money because I think they only had to pay out about 15, 16 for 17, 18. Sorry. So when you say in like manners, when you talk about numbers for like football and lacrosse and stuff, and I'm not being a hypocrite because my son played all those sports, what's never figured into that budget is what is our maintenance people, their time and effort, the paint to do the fields and stuff like that. So I know people look at it and say hockey, ice time's expensive, but the field maintenance is never included in the other sports. And that's something to consider, that the
That's a
school
good
is
point.
paying for that,
All right.
the
So-
lights for the football.
I will restate that if someone wanted to make a motion to fund hockey for jerseys, transportation, field time, and refs, I would accept that as a motion that's in order to clarify the previous motion, which was unclear. Karen?
Do we know when hockey needs to know this information and when they need to start? I mean, I'm assuming they're fundraising already.
They were told they were funded, so I don't think
Yeah.
Right.
they're
So-
funding, raising a little bit, because we saw that at last meeting, they had a couple, but.
My understanding is they didn't send out donation request letters, which is
Right.
where the largest amount came from. They're still trying to do some miscellaneous funding. I think it was on the last one, corn stalks
and
and
something else.
I don't remember what the other is, but I do know that the corporate letters didn't go out based on the fact that they were told that the funding was coming from the school.
We're not having a meeting there, we're having a meeting here.
So I guess my personal feeling is, it sounds like the hockey team was expecting it, but we as a board didn't pass adequate motions in the right manner. I feel we made a knee-jerk reaction. And the one thing that I've been asking for, and I know several other board members for at least 3 years, I mean, when I started extracurricular, we started working on this, is a list of all of the clubs and sports and how much they're funded. And, so we could actually see a list of how much we're funding, how much the boosters are paying for these clubs. The other thing I'm confused on, and I'd like information on, is the gate receipt fund we're discussing. What does that encompass? What sports pay into it, and what sports are taking out of it? I have no idea who's paying into that. There's a valid point where people go to football games, frankly, myself included. I'm not a big football person. I go literally to watch the band. So is it adequate to take stuff for the band out of that if it's only an athletic? So I guess I would like clarification on what we're paying for each club. How much are their individual fundraising efforts gaining? And then also the gate receipts, who's paying into that and what is coming out of that? And is that fair and equitable? Or maybe we should be dividing that gate receipt fund up into different things so that, or different gate receipts, hockey gate receipts or whatnot. I don't have a solution. I'm just saying, I feel like that's information the board's been asking for a while.
All right, so can we turn this into a request for information, and we can do that by way of a motion? Can we ask our business manager to tell us hockey gate receipts, and also the cost of jerseys, plus transportation, plus field time, plus referees for hockey?
Yeah, I would also like to, as a friendly, I would like to know who else pays into that gate receipts and, what has come out of it over the course of maybe 2 years. How much is generated from football or whatnot.
Just to speak to that, Tom did speak to that last year, and he talked about gate receipts have to be very careful with Title IX violations, and that usually the gate receipt money goes into things that are going to benefit large groups like the scoreboards or like field maintenance or
Well, I know
something like that. So
in the past, we've taken like fireworks out of it and stuff like that, so it's like, it's all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, we can get a definite list. I just want to remind that he did speak to Title IX, especially when it came to gate receipts.
But I do feel we've let the, hockey and all of the students and as well as other teams down, because we've asked for that information and tried to get that information, and we never have seen it.
Would anyone like to make a motion to request the information on the cost of jerseys plus transportation, field time, and refs for hockey, and specifically gate receipts from hockey?
So moved.
That's Betty. Is there a second?
Second.
Second is from Sherry. Is there any discussion?
Just a small clerical one. You said field time, it should be ice time.
Sure. When
Sorry,
I
I
say
just-
field time, I mean ice time, but I mean for it to be a broad
Or, okay.
sort of,
All-
yeah, in a similar manner as other sports, field time, ice time, yeah. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
I'm gonna
I got
abstain.
abstentions from Nick, Rob, and Karen.
Wheeler.
Motion passes. Winston?
Yeah, I've been looking at this, and when it says it was allocated to come from unallocated funds, it was voted on in April. It was still in last year's funding project. We voted to hold that money if it should become available.
But the budget had already passed.
That's all right. This was supposed to come from the unallocated funds, which to us was surplus, or whatever you call it now, unfunded.
And we were
It's
told
already-
that we
It's
couldn't
already
do
been
that.
explained why you can't do it. We've already
Right.
talked about it tonight.
We have done it before, as long as we got it in before June 30th.
But when, the thing is, usually before, we had something to spend it on. This here was too broad, is what they're saying.
It has to have a
Who is
contract.
they?
Have a contract.
Contract, and it says up
RSAs.
to.
Imagine it's the DRA.
I
Yes,
don't think it ever went to DRA.
Contract.
Yeah.
it was the Department of Revenue who said that we couldn't because it was not some certain. You said up to 20,000, you'd have to say,
Wanted
we
to be
want to
exactly.
reserve
No, I remember
20,000.
that answer
But
now, okay.
also, you really need to have a contract in place. So Neil's example was if the ice rink said, you know, we will give you a quote for what your ice will cost next
And we had a
year.
bill
Then you
in front
can
of
Then
us.
we
hold it
could have
over.
used that
Yeah.
to hold over the money.
All right.
Can I motion to fund hockey in a similar manner for this as other
Come on,
sports as
let's
this
have a
year?
number.
Or am I not, to clarify this motion that already passed, that I feel that is correct and did pass and should be
All right, so
followed?
We'd like to make a friendly amendment.
Well, it's,
Well, it doesn't
So
have a
I
second.
think, I think we just settled it, actually. We made a request for information, and
And then it will come forward to the next
it'll
board
come
meeting.
forward to the next board meeting. Is that satisfactory? You're welcome to make your motion at that time. Are we ready to do it now?
What does Janelle have to say?
I would agree with that. I mean, that will give you the number that you need.
Yeah, we need a number.
And to have a concrete
All right, I'll
motion.
withdraw.
Thank you. All right, so moving on to board chair report, we have two events that we need to schedule. The first is the district funding formula day-long session. Do I have any suggestions on when we would like to do that? It needs to be on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon.
Is this the letter you're talking about?
No, we'll get there. We'll get there. But that's the delegation letter, I think, under operations and superintendent's report. Nope, sorry, it's not the delegations letter, but it's there. When would we like to do our talk about the funding formula for the district? We need to do that sooner rather than later. It needs to happen on a Saturday or a Sunday afternoon.
Why do we need to do it sooner rather than later?
Because in order to create a warrant article, it needs to be in by December,
early December.
early December.
But
We
I don't,
we blew that up.
yeah.
But at the last
Just
meeting,
put
we
it
said
on
we
the
wanted to
agenda.
do it.
We
At
talked
the-
about it earlier tonight.
2 weeks ago, we said we wanted to do it, so we're being
At the last
wishy-washy.
meeting, there was a motion to hold a day-long session among the board members.
For education.
Jeremy?
So to add to this, or not add to it, but to, and it might take some of the pressure off a little bit, but I spoke at length to Jim O'Shaughnessy today or today, I think it was, today, about the questions that the board wanted answered, and I'll talk about some of them in the superintendent's report, but also about adequacy and the caps and the legality of that. And he feels very strongly that he should come in and speak to you about funding, about some direction and some suggestions that the board, he thinks, would be able to take that would help. And he sees it as a longer process than the fall. He sees it as a, let's get ducks in a row for next year sort of thing.
Does he charge double time for the weekend?
Probably.
He'll
Probably no
prepare an
worse than 9
opinion.
at
He said he'll
night.
do it any way you guys want, but he does feel like he wants to offer you some guidance. He wanted me to bring that up tonight,
Can he come to the library on the 7th?
probably.
Can you ask him if he will come to the library on the 7th?
Yes.
Excuse me?
All right, Nick.
I remember from last meeting that we had a series of questions that we are going to get answered from Jim and have forwarded to us. But I don't remember the board voting on proceeding with coming up with a formula. That isn't something
The
that we.
board voted to have a day-long session.
An open discussion.
Educational
Yeah.
section.
To get into the math. That's it.
So if Jim O'Shaughnessy is able to join us on the 7th of November, we could feasibly meet on the 10th of November, which is a Saturday, or the 11th in the afternoon. That's Veterans Day.
I thought we had talked about the 7th.
Scott?
Do we, Jeremy, from your conversation, do you feel that Jim should be talking to us in a non-meeting or as part of a meeting?
No, nothing he's
It would
going to
be
talk about
non-
can't be done in public. It's not. He's just looking at. He wants everyone to kind of understand. He wants to give suggestions for a process that he thinks would be successful for the board to move forward and make good decisions when it comes to funding.
So I'll make the motion to hold on scheduling an informational session until we've heard the advice of our council at the next available public meeting.
Second.
All right. Is there any discussion on that? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions. So that means we're asking Jim to
You abstain, Rob?
speak with us on the 7th.
We're gonna
All right.
see if
We also have the training on board roles
We
and
have to.
responsibilities. I have a list of dates that are available by the attorney of the School Boards Association. The first of them is next Wednesday, the 24th. Is there anyone opposed to next Wednesday, the 24th in the evening?
Do we have a sense of the duration, how much time we're going to spend together on this?
This is generally a 3-hour training.
Is this an evening training, or
Yeah, evening.
I can't make it on the 24th?
All right, the next available date is the 1st of November. That's a Thursday. Anyone opposed to the 1st of November?
I can't make it that night.
Nor can I.
I have a feeling this is going to happen a lot, but it's a good process.
You're going to have to pick one, but go ahead.
All right, Monday, the 5th of November. Is there anyone who knows they're not available on Monday, the 5th of November?
What would the hours be?
I'm going to say from 5 to 8 or 5:30 to 8:30.
I could come late.
Yeah. We could do 6 to 9. I mean, we're used to late meetings. 6 to 9? Monday, the 5th, 6 to 9?
Sounds like a plan.
Sure.
All right.
Do you need space for that?
Yeah, we do. This space would be lovely.
Or Wilcox?
Wilcox would be fine, too.
It's just a little easier to schedule.
All right, so we'll call it November the 5th, 6 to 9.
You said that was a Monday?
That's a Monday, and I'll confirm it with him.
Oh, it is on a Monday.
All right, operation and superintendent's report.
I'm going to let Kathy go first. So come on up, Kathy. We're going to do special ed compliance first.
I gave you
two handouts before the meeting. I'll just give it to you. I left them in your place. If we start first with the multi-page that is numbered, start on page
Atta girl.
19. That is numbered. Numbered.
What page, please?
19. We've talked a lot for the past few years about the district's compliance with indicators 11, 12, and 13. The information for last year has, well, not last year, the year before has come out because they're always 2 years behind. So with indicator 11, which is timeliness of evaluations, it's one of those things that it is either compliant or it is not. So if you don't have 100% compliance, then you're not meeting the mark. And you can see that for 16, 17, we hit the mark, and we anticipate hitting the mark again for 17, 18. And we believe we have people and processes in place so that we don't go off of that 100% again. With indicator 12, it's the transition from early supports and services, which is for children with disabilities birth through age 3. The transition from that system to our preschool system, their IEP has to be in place by their 3rd birthday, literally on their 3rd birthday. And we sometimes have not had a cell size that was appropriate for counting, meaning that we had too few students. And, you know, we've gone up and down on this one. But for 16, 17, we met the mark with full compliance. And we anticipate being fully compliant for 17, 18.
When do those numbers come out again for 17, 18?
17, 18 won't be out until closer to the end of the school year. They're usually always 2 years behind, so. And then indicator 13 was the area, the third area that we had been out of compliance with for a number of years. This is on IEPs starting with age 14. There has to at least be a statement of transition for that student, meaning transition to post-secondary outcomes. And then by age 16, there has to be, or the IEP in which they turn 16, there has to be a fully mapped out plan, a transition plan. They only check each district once in a cycle, and that cycle is based on when the IDEA is reauthorized, and it is well out of whack. So its last authorization was in like 2004, or I think 4. So that's like 14 years. It should have been done 4 years ago. But they've been a little busy in Washington doing other things. So we're hopeful that it will be reauthorized this year. And so that'll start the cycle again. The last time we were audited for secondary transition plans was in 2010 and 11, and we reached 100% compliance at that time, so.
What's the 2014, 2015 number of 0%?
2014, 15. Oh, yes, you're right. So what's that go to? Oh my gosh, that's indicator 14 I was looking at. Literally, when they came in 14, 15, that was the year before I came. They found 0 compliant transition plans. But they didn't look at every single IEP for kids in that age range. You know, they pull this random sampling, and so of the ones that they happened to pull, there weren't appropriate transition plans.
So it literally could have been one sample?
It could have been one file, yeah. Usually they would pull more than that, though.
Quick question, you said they don't do it unless the IDA has been, but how is there a state average then?
So the state average is from 2004 to 2018. I mean, it's like, They haven't checked anybody since 14, 15. So the state's been off the hook on that one, too.
So it should be the same number then.
Right.
The state average. Right, it shouldn't keep changing. No, that's true. It was in 14, 15, it was 54.67%. Somehow it went up the next year. But there is some, Jeremy and I have talked before about some of the manners of calculation are sometimes a bit mysterious.
All right, any other questions on this?
On the one pager, oops, sorry.
I was just wondering, what does it mean if you fail?
So what
does that zero mean, for example?
So it meant that they kind of put us on notice about that, said you have to fix this, you have to have some training. If after training there's no improvement, then they can tell you that you need to use part of your IDEA grant funds to specifically address that indicator.
Okay.
And then, you know, like we were with a number of indicators, if you're out of compliance for over a long period of time, then they'll come in and
They'll come in and take it over,
like
right?
they were doing when I came in. On this page, this is just your current numbers, the colored page. At the top, you see that there's 317 preschool through age 21 IEPs in the district. And it tells you on the chart which one, under what disability categories those kids fall. And I've given you a key for those abbreviations.
It's like 20% of the student body.
AUT is autism. Yes, it is about that, which is a bit high. The state average, which they try not to give because there's so many variables and they include preschool, but we really only count preschoolers with disabilities, you know, so it's a bit off, but they're about 10, 11%. So we're a bit high when comparing against the state, but when comparing against the region, we're about average. The southwest region of New Hampshire tends to be a little higher. And then on the bottom of the page in the green and white charts, you see where the children are. You know, whether they're at Cutler or Mount Caesar, whether they're in a chartered school or an out-of-district placement, or we have 2 kids in other public schools. So I kind of gave you a historical view and then where we are as of October 1st.
All right. I have a couple of questions on indicator 5. It shows us that the percentage of the percentage of students in regular class, 80% or more of the day is 77 versus the target of 72%. That's a good thing.
Our numbers are going in the right direction on that indicator for sure.
For inclusion. Can you help me understand what B means? Inside regular class, less than 40% of the day? It shows 9.36% versus the 7.97% that is our target.
So those would be kids that, and I would have expected this to change given the increase in use of resource room settings in the district that went into place at the end of 15, 16. No, at the end of 14, 15. So some of those students in the resource rooms are in those resource rooms, you know, up to 40% of their day. And so I think that's where we started to see that change.
Following in that, we have students who are, it looks like outplacements, residential placements or homebound or hospital placements, 4.2% versus the 2.61%. It's really similar to that's what we would expect and hope for.
It's really, we are a bit high in that area. Again, when you compare against the state, it looks high. When you compare against the region, it's, you know, it's really close to what other districts in our region are experiencing in terms of out-of-district placements.
Is that sometimes based on the number of outplacement facilities that are available in a certain region?
It can be. You know, it's good and bad that we're on the border of Vermont and Massachusetts. In fact, some of our placements that are in Massachusetts are closer to us than other ones that are in New Hampshire. So for us, that's, we do have more available because we're right on the border. And there are really quite a few placements within an hour of most of our homes, which is what we try and stick to. We can't always do that. We also have what you don't see is and I didn't bring it with me, the breakout of how many of those students are placed by the courts because of their bad behavior, or those students who are placed in other places based on their parents' bad behavior. So DCYF versus like chins or delinquency. And so those kinds of numbers make a big difference in terms of how many students out of district that you have.
And there's a small discrepancy on indicator 8, parent involvement, but it seems to favor us, 39% versus the 36% that's the state standard.
So parent involvement is measured by the sending out of a survey. And the percentage is based on how many surveys from our parents are received back. I'm not sure that I would agree that that is measuring how the amount that parents are involved in their child's special education process, but that's how it's measured nonetheless. This past year, so that would be 17-18, there were so few received back from many districts that they actually offered those districts almost like a second chance to send out this reminder again. I think parents get surveyed to death, so to speak, and they don't have time or whatever. They don't think it's important. So surveys, and actually 36% is pretty good for any research on surveys, in receiving them back. But what we get back as a district is kind of an analysis by item. So we can look at some areas where there's some trends that maybe we're not doing a real good job with. One of those traditionally is informing parents about community resources.
So we have nailed indicators lists 11, 12,
and 13.
And
13.
14,
Yeah.
which was they were all of concern. So what are we focusing on next?
We're actually taking a look now at some more curricular areas, such as specialized instruction in reading, and are we providing enough of a specialized program to really help move those kids forward who have reading disabilities. And we're evaluating some programming that we're offering at the middle high school.
Nick?
So it looks like we're doing really well with procedural stuff, with how it's being administered and the way that students are identified and receive the services. I'm looking on page 16 and 17. It's kind of weird. I was trying to figure out what indicator that belongs to. It looks like it's 7, but 7's listed as preschool performance. And then it goes to 8 on page 18. So, but regardless, looking at 16 and 17, this looks at whatever metrics that you use for improvements that occur with the children. It looks like we kind of significantly lag behind the state on these. State performance. What are we doing in those areas to?
So those are preschool outcomes.
Okay, these are all.
Yes, and the measure that is used to assess preschoolers was changed in 15-16. So that was the first year we used it. So we would expect that there would be a change in the percentage or the outcomes for those students because of the newness of the assessment. And things like that, and maybe it's different things it's measuring than the old test, that kind of thing. We are also focusing on preschool this year, in terms of whether we feel we should assess all the students or just those students who have IEPs, whether we should mix our 3- and 4-year-olds like we're currently doing, or should we break them apart? You know, and really kind of going back to ground about, you know, what is it that we believe about preschool, and doing some of that work.
Yeah, and I think tying into that, I can't remember, it was last year or the year before or the year before that, we talked about, it was on the I think it was the budget, the session when we had the joint budget meeting, but in the morning, we had like a 4-hour session with all the selectmen and stuff, and we talked about things, the 2 things that we focused on were preparedness for school, what we can do for children to get them better prepared for school, and how do we prepare them for leaving school. And we had about a 4-hour discussion with everybody. So I kind of see this tied into this a little bit as well. Do you think having the better, administering these programs better and identifying the children properly and transitioning them, we're going to see better improvements at these early ages?
One thing we know for sure is that kids who attend preschool do better in kindergarten. We also have a new law that mandates play-based kindergarten. So we are, you know, working our way like everybody else in the state, and how do you implement that while also meeting some curricular standards? You know, so if kindergarten's mandated to be play-based, well, then preschool really ought to be play-based too. And how do you balance having curricular expectations, as there should be, with also having real situations that children can learn about social, emotional behavior and skills, and those kinds of things that you learn from play. So we're going to have the full conversation with the staff and including administration.
Any other questions for Kathy? Excellent report, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jeremy?
Okay. Are you gonna share, Lisa? I have it up and I can do it.
You can go ahead.
Okay, so update from Lisa. In your board packet, you see there's a couple letters in there. This one that says, the shorter of the one, it's not two, it's a delegation. I have an update from Lisa, and I just want to explain what this is, through the advice of the association and the council, that it just delegates me to be able to sign things that Lisa would typically sign, like grant reports and things of that nature, the kind of day-to-day sort of thing, so that they're not sitting and waiting. She also talks about what we're doing in her absence. We talk constantly. Kathy, Lisa, and Janelle and I are always in contact. She knows exactly what's happening at this board meeting right now because we're in contact. You've seen us looking at our phones. It's because we're telling Lisa what's going on so that she can stay in touch. So she is available by phone, and things are really looking up for her family right now. She got some good news today about her dad and her mom and how that's going to work out for them. So she did send a letter that an email that she'd like me to read, to share with all of you, just to check in, if that's okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you for all the good wishes, positive thoughts, and words of encouragement over the past couple of weeks. I can't put into words how much I appreciate it, so thanks will have to do. Jeremy, Janelle, and Catherine have done an outstanding job in my absence and are to be recognized and commended. Between email, text messaging, and group phone calls, we have tackled this hurdle as a team as much as possible, and I think that's a statement to their leadership and expertise. A testament. Lillian, too, has gone above and beyond to help facilitate communication and ensure everything continues to flow in an uninterrupted fashion. Dad had surgery on Thursday and is recovering fairly well. I had hoped he will be transferring to inpatient rehab yesterday or today, but he had a small setback yesterday that will likely push that out a bit further. And then she got news today that it's going to move pretty quickly, so that's good news. As all of this unfolded, Dad disclosed to me and hospital staff that for approximately the last year and a half, he has been hiding and compensating for my mother's rapidly declining cognitive function. I spent the past 2 weeks with her 24/7, and she is simply not the same person I once knew and is in need of significant support, as my father is not able to fill that role at this time. I was able to get her to the doctor on Friday for an assessment and start the process for identifying appropriate next steps for both of them in both the short and long terms. I'm holding up pretty well, all things considered. I miss my daughter, my home, and of course I miss Monadnock. I do think there is an end in sight, and I will be sure to keep you updated moving forward. So we're hoping that end is at the end of this week, and that we'll see her back here sometime next week.
Thank you.
So that's that. But, you know, we can assure you that nothing's being forgotten. She's completely in touch with us all the time.
Thank you very
5
much.
o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock at night. So there's that. I have an unexpected bit of information to share with you. About 4 o'clock, an email came in from Jim O'Shaughnessy that the court ruled in favor of Monadnock in the court case with the association about the insurance pool.
We won't need the docket number.
I have it. I have it copied for you, and if it's
As long as it's in our favor, I don't care what the answer is.
if the
Well,
numbering
take it
is
seriously.
wrong, you can contact the court, not me.
I know why I was a little winded walking in. It's because I was having this conversation. I was excited.
So I'm going to pass that around so you know. We were advised by Jim that the association has 10 days to request, I'm going to say it wrong, so I'm going to reconsideration and 30 days to appeal. So he advises that we don't do anything
Temporary site.
right now. He said, you know, you have to wait because if you do anything, that could cause problems. But he did want us to pass this along.
So what does that mean, found in favor of the district? It means that.
So there's, if you read in that document, it's 392 and change thousand. That's the actual number. You know, a lot of people throw out different numbers, but the actual number is around 392. And what that means is that should go back to, Janelle, I'm gonna say it wrong. That becomes unencumbered. It wasn't
Right.
a fund. It should have never been a fund balance.
Right.
Right. So,
So it can go back to the taxpayers.
yes.
That's what I was going to ask. Janelle, does that go
just
back to,
thinking the same thing.
assuming it goes through,
Okay.
that goes back to the taxpayers?
It would, but it wouldn't be until the end of this fiscal year because, like Jeremy was saying, Jim O'Shaughnessy is recommending that we don't do anything.
Understand, but
For the next 30
it won't
days.
just go into the pool, into our budget, right? It'll go back, eventually back to the taxpayers.
Right. Absolutely.
All right.
So it really isn't.
So just so I'm understanding, Janelle, it's currently in a balance, a reserved fund
reserved
balance.
balance.
Would, after the 30 days, would it go back immediately, or would it go back at the end of June when the books are closed for next year? Okay, thank you.
I remember from, I don't think you were on board then when we received all the letters, but I remember getting letters from all the selectmen from almost every town regarding this. So I'm sure they're going to be interested in the outcome.
Well, you handed it out, so it's already public.
It's public,
It's
yeah.
a public
Oh, yeah.
record, yeah. We wouldn't make a proactive attempt to get it out to all of the selectmen unless there was a motion to that effect.
I would wait until the 30 days are up personally.
I was just saying because I remember the selectmen addressed the board on this issue.
I spoke to Lisa this afternoon when it came in, and she felt that it was really important to get it out to you tonight, even though we don't know everything yet, and that there's still things that could happen. She didn't want to hold it for 2 weeks.
All right,
That's good news.
update on SSO.
So I got to talk to Mr. O'Shaughnessy quite a bit. So here's what we know about the SSO. We did hear back from Primex, and Primex responded in that, you know, they don't have anything that precludes us from having an armed SSO. However, any incident that happened that could be considered unlawful or was ruled unlawful would not be covered by them, basically. So if there was an unlawful shooting of any kind, you know, and there was a suit, Primex wouldn't cover it. And they made that clear to us, and that's similar to what police departments have to deal with as well. So I talked to Jim O'Shaughnessy about that, and he said that is really, really wide open. You have to be careful. So we spent a a long time, just kind of going back and forth over. And what he wants some clarification on from the board before he moves forward is, he feels there is a lot of things that needs to happen, and he doesn't know all of those things particularly. Like, we would have to work with a lot of different groups. The law, he said, the law, the new interpretation of the law is, yes, you can have someone with a concealed carry on campus. However, as counsel, he is not suggesting we just do that without going through some steps first, like courses, like, like, the person who carries the gun obviously has to be qualified and do the qualifying with the police department, but there are a lot of people out there who feel like there needs to be an SRO or an SSO trained in a school setting, understanding the different needs of different students. And he said we really need to be careful about how we talk about this, that we're not talking about our current SSO, because we'd be creating a policy or he's like, you got to box that out, and you have to think about what you're really asking for when you're allowing someone to carry a gun in your school. And that what he wants clarification from the board on basically is, do you want him to prepare the steps that he thinks are necessary for the board to take before he could, as legal counsel, say that this is something that he can advise for?
Would anyone like to make a motion on that?
I just have one quick question.
I have a question
But
too, Matthew.
what does it mean when an insurance company says, we'll cover you, but we're not going to cover you if something unlawful happens?
I can explain.
Yeah,
We'll cover you if your car gets crashed, but if it's your car gets crashed while, but if it's like while you stole a car or something like that, if there's an unlawful action taking place during the event and the claim, then it's a no-go.
So it'll cover accidents, but it won't cover.
We're not doing 100.
Shooter comes in and starts wounding people, we don't have any coverage.
I believe what they're really saying is, if there's a shooting, if our employee shoots and
Misses.
it gets brought as a criminal trial and they find out that that was an unlawful shooting, that they're not going to cover the lawsuit.
What other case would you want to have insurance for then?
So that's one of the things that Jim really wants to talk about.
Right.
So, okay,
That's what I'm getting at.
all right, you lose your vehicle because Mr. Harrison used to tell this story, because you toss, like, a bone and the dog chases the bone and it brings it back and goes under the truck and it explodes or whatever, because you wanted to blow a grenade in a hole in the fishing ice, right?
You are out there.
Okay, so this is Mr. Harrison talk.
Talking about cars
All right, so-
grenades and fishing.
Yeah, all right, so
I think I'll wait. I can wait to hear from.
anyway, if it's an accident and you throw the grenade and the dog fetches it, runs under the new truck, and the truck sinks through the ice, then it's covered because it was just stupidity. However, if it's that you leave your car unlocked and the keys in the car in the Bronx, then it's sort of intentional, it's neglect, and it's not covered. Sorry about that.
To either one of you, can you just get a writer for it? No, they just won't touch it at all.
No, you can't get a rider for breaking the law.
Yeah. Janelle has the email right there.
Do you want me to read the exact email from Primex's legal counsel?
How long is
That's
it?
who they had.
How long is it?
It's only a few sentences.
Oh, yeah.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
Primex coverage doesn't prohibit the situation described below, which is what you were asking. The only concern I will mention is that we have an exclusion for violations of law. Use of deadly force is an area that can trigger this exclusion with respect to the shooter's coverage. For example, deadly force that is not legally justified can, in many cases, be found to be a crime.
It's the same thing in the police department.
And that was the last sentence. However, this is a concern that our insured police officers must also be mindful of with respect to their duties, and Primex also covers the Swansea Police Department.
In the police department, you're indemnified as long as your act is a good conscience. But if you go out and shoot your girlfriend or your wife, they're not going to indemnify you. You committed a crime. I believe that's what they're talking about.
Okay.
That was the easy way of saying that.
Well, Jim just added the second layer that we have to think about, is that you don't just have to think about, because with police, it's a different world than what we're talking about. He said, we really have to think about rules and guidelines and contracts and job descriptions and who owns and maintains the weapons, what holsters we're using. He said, we really have to think about everything and to do this right.
I see that I had 3 hands, but what I'm really looking for right now is a motion for us to have Jim O'Shaughnessy put together his recommendations and come and speak with us about them.
I was going to make that.
I'll second it.
And then would yours fit into discussion on that motion?
Well, we're asking questions about the insurance that responds. That's
So how about we make the
It
motion
fits.
and then move into discussion?
All right,
because
so-
we aren't discussing that. I was
Yeah.
discussing something separate.
All right, so we have a motion from Brian
Second.
to have Jim O'Shaughnessy give us some recommendations about steps that we need to take before we implement this. And then Karen seconded already.
Okay.
And Karen B., did your question fit into discussion under this motion?
I was actually going to make the motion, sorry.
Okay. So Karen W.?
Okay, and I apologize, I read the minutes, but I wasn't present at the meeting. I was just hoping for a recap. So he would be under Monadnock's Primex insurance, even though Swansea has Primex as well, correct? He would be under our insurance.
Right, because he wouldn't be working for the Swansea.
Okay, so even though you'd be, certified and whatnot through Swansea, it would be under ours, correct?
He would be
I just
under
don't know,
our
I wanted to know the
insurance.
politics of, like,
But he would be under the wing and tutelage of the Swansea Police Department. They'd be responsible for training him, or they would do that sort of as a favor to us.
right. So I guess that goes back to what Jeremy was saying with what Jim was saying, like, where do how's the equipment maintained and, upholsters and his uniform, that falls under Swansea, yet it would be under our insurance. So I do think we need to, make sure that we have that all written out and.
Neil and then Scott.
I'm assuming that you said that the chief of Swansea is going to come and give this speech? Is that what you meant?
He came last week.
I saw him. I watched it on Wednesday. By the way, don't let him step away from the speaker. The only one that remembered it was Frank.
Thank you. Scott.
So, to be clear with what we're asking for, and I think Jim would have this intent, we talk about this in the context of Frank, because we know and love Frank, and Frank presents a unique opportunity as a former police officer who has qualified in the past. But I think what we're looking for is all the things our council would recommend for the role, as if someday Frank were to retire from the role, we were to backfill the role. We're talking about a hybrid between SSO and SRO, where an SSO can carry a concealed weapon. All the criteria of safety, contracts, legalities, policies, et cetera, it's like a soup to nuts punch list of everything we need to step through in order to achieve that for the role.
Yeah, that's why he wanted you guys to vote on it, because it's a big opinion that he's writing, and he wanted to
And
make
not
sure
just
that's what
that,
we
but the new law could open the door for concealed carry by the public as well.
Anybody, that's what I was going to
Right.
correct you.
So we
It's
want to
not
make sure
just
we
a
don't
policeman.
open the door for concealed carry by the public, right?
A teacher could carry a
I
gun
think
into
it
the
has
school.
opened that door.
It has, yeah.
But our
Yeah.
policies still.
Neil?
No, that's what I was going to say. Correct him. He said a police officer.
Well, so
Anybody.
So I appreciate that. I think if we can just get specific about what we ask Jim for, let's understand what we need to do for our SSO, and let's understand what we need to do as a district to cover all the legalities, contracts, safety measures for, anyone who may come in with a concealed weapon. What do we need to do to protect ourselves? And I do see in some of the NHSBA policy update, there's sort of like tickler messages of what's coming to address that, but we haven't seen a lot yet. So I think in 6 or 12 months, we're going to see sample policy changes, but what does Jim feel we should be doing in the very short term to make sure that we're protected?
All right. So we're ready to vote on this motion, on whether we need the opinion of our legal counsel. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Very good. BOY numbers?
All right, I'm just going to pass them out. There's not a lot to say about them yet. I want to remind everyone, and this is something that we need to clarify, that the BOY numbers are the October 1st numbers, but they're not numbers that are generated on October 1st. They're numbers that are generated from the numbers that are generated on October 1st.
Beginning of year enrollment.
Yes, thank you, sorry. Beginning of year enrollment, it's BOY. So that report is due to the state. We tell the state what we have, what we think we have, basically, by October 15th. The state does a formula that we actually don't know. Neil says I should write to know it, and I'm trying to figure out who to write to know it to. They do a formula to figure out, they have to take into account all kinds of things, number of days, number of absences. So these are not the certified BOY numbers. So what you're going to see is historical, and then this year's estimates, or our best guess, what the state's going to say our BOY numbers are in red. And I just want to clarify that they're not certified by the state yet, and they haven't done their work. Overall, we're holding steady in a lot of places. The elementaries are growing more than anywhere else, and the middle high school is staying about steady, is the quick. Neil, I don't have them by town. We didn't have them by town
Sure.
yet, but I will.
You're going to get them eventually that way, right?
Absolutely, yep. We just couldn't, she was
Don't
getting
worry
that
about it.
report done. She just couldn't get it done.
So, Jeremy, not to sound snarky, but did I just hear you that you're saying this is our estimate of the state's estimates of our estimates?
Basically, yeah. So what happens is we send the numbers to the state, and then they look at the kids who are out of district or not showing up or in alternative programs of some kind, and they it's called I4C is what the system is called, and they fix kids that are assigned to the wrong place, or it's really, we tried really hard. Lisa and I spent some time last year trying to figure out the formula, and we think we got pretty close, but not exactly. So the actual certified numbers will be out mid-November.
When you get it, could you do a summary, one, two?
Absolutely, yeah, and we'll do it by town, so, because that's all, Janelle's gonna need all that, obviously, for adequacy and budget and that, so we'll have all of that when the state gives it to us.
Scott?
So, one of the areas where I think we get gummed up, like when we're talking about head count and space and things like that in the buildings, is it would appear on many fronts that the number's going down trend-wise, right? We've been talking about that a lot. We had a little bit of a spike last year in some buildings, et cetera. But the boy numbers don't include the pre-K.
Right. Yep.
Which is consumed like a classroom in each building where we're doing a preschool program.
Yeah, and Mount Caesar too.
Yeah.
So I'm looking here, and one real stifling change is in sixth grade for Emerson. It went from 15 to 27, but really if we read that, it's the students from fifth grade last year moving to sixth grade this year. It moves 26 to 27, right?
Right, yeah.
All right, Brian.
The totals in the bottom, like for Mount Caesar, 17, 18 are not 250, and 16, 17 are not 274, unless there's a number hidden that I'm not seeing, or the total isn't right.
Where did third grade go?
So this is tough if we don't look at Cutler and Mount Caesar side by side, because there was a year when we...
Right, but 16, 17, and 17, 18,
Yeah, they don't
the
have-
grades were already moved.
Yeah.
The totals aren't right.
Gonna bring a better estimate,
Those might
Jeremy.
include pre-K. I'll have to look at the actual spreadsheet.
Spreadsheet fix.
Okay.
But I think that's what it is. I think it's pre-K.
I know we don't file the boy numbers, but the next time we see this, it would be great to include the pre-K numbers.
Oh, I see. I found them.
Pre-K, so that's where we avoided a little, only because it gets a little confusing, because pre-K, do you count them as whole kids, or do you count them as half kids, because they only come for half the time? So, we'll do our best to explain what we're counting.
Can we count them as whole kids?
I mean, they are, of course, whole kids, but it's, if we say there's 30 pre-K, we don't want to mislead you to think that there's 30 kids in the room at one time. There's probably 15 kids in the room. Well, there's never that many, but if it's 20, maybe there's 10 in the morning and 10 in the afternoon. So I want to make sure that we clarify that so it doesn't look inflated, that there's 20 kids in the room all the time. Yeah.
You do it on 2 lines?
I'm sorry?
The pre-K, 2 lines, maybe,
Yeah.
morning, afternoon.
So you're saying the 18, 19 number then doesn't include pre-K? Is that what the difference is?
Yeah, it doesn't look like it does. I have to ask Lillian.
Thank you.
All right. So, sort of a separate matter, would we be able to have classroom sizes for next school board meeting?
What do you mean?
Just get that?
So class,
just got that.
no, class sizes, not grade
Yeah.
sizes.
Last meeting.
Oh, individual class
Yeah.
size. Yeah, we
We
got
got that last time.
Yeah, because
It
we
was
had
2
classes.
weeks
Got
Want
it
it
last
again?
time, but that was an estimation. It was at the very beginning of the school year, and there are some
Yeah.
classes that
Sure.
got smaller because kids didn't show up.
And
Some
some
got
classes that
bigger.
got bigger, absolutely. We can update that. That's no problem.
Okay.
So that data was from the beginning? Wow, it is the beginning of the year.
I can do it again. I'll do it again based on right now. And I'll just put it in the board packet, and I don't think we even need to spend a lot of time speaking to it unless you want to, but I'll just
No,
make
not
sure you
really.
have
I
it.
mean, I just think that it's good for the board to see that there was a first or second grade class we estimated at 26, and it came in at 23, 22, so that's a good thing. All right, unallocated fund balance.
Okay. The unallocated fund balance and the DOE 25 MS 25 are part of the same conversation. Recently, we had more field work done by our auditors. I thought we were really close to wrapping that up for our FY17 audit. But they became aware of some significant adjustments that they felt were of a material nature that needed to happen. And when I say material, it means it impacts your fund balance. So I haven't been able to complete your DOE 25 and your MS 25 because it takes into account your unallocated fund balance. And these adjustments that they're talking about, some of them go back to 2016. Some of them were for 2017. And your DOE 25s, MS 25s were already filed for those years. So unfortunately, it means it's going to carry forward into this year. It's to the taxpayer's benefit. It's actually increasing our fund balance, but whereas it was already pretty large, we were anticipating it to be pretty large as it was. For instance, at the end of September, I was anticipating that number to be 1.8 million. And with the adjustments that we have done so far, we are at sorry, I have it. I do have it with me. Too many papers.
Are you
It's
talking about this year?
2.2 or 2.3.
Are you talking about 17? Fiscal
I'm talking
17?
about 18 because we have to bump it forward. Your tax rate for last year was already set. So any increase is going to actually affect. Sorry.
Yeah, well, you're looking, can I ask a question?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
How does that happen?
So there's.
I mean, we're not talking about $5 or $10 that someone forgot to turn in a receipt. We're talking about
Right, it's a
$500,000.
few $100,000, so.
You said 1.8 and it could be 2.3? That was $500,000.
And it, right.
Can I just remind the board that generally when we have the board and budget committee meeting, we go into detail about where the unallocated fund balance came from?
No, I'm saying the discrepancy.
Oh, okay, I have it, sorry. We're about 2.145 right now, and I believe that there are more adjustments that are going to be made. So I'm still not quite ready, but the auditor that they would have sent to do the forensic audit that we thought maybe we might do, he has spent the last 2 days with me. He was here yesterday and today to try to help us get through this so that we can do those reports to the state. Because I contacted the auditors at the end of last week and I said, I can't keep waiting. I'm going to have to go with the numbers that we have. And they called me almost immediately and said, we would really recommend that you not do that because of these material differences that they had found. one instance is the liability for dental. There was over $200,000 in that. Well, we paid our dental. That amount should have cleared out. So we don't owe that. It was showing as a liability, but we didn't actually owe it because we had paid it. So that is an adjustment that increased our fund balance. That's one example.
Right?
Is it normal to have such a large unallocated fund balance? I mean, I'm trying to get some perspective here on, are we in line with any other general district, or is this a significant misjudgment on our bookkeeping practices?
We'll be making some changes going forward. I don't know if that helps to answer your question. And the auditor is looking at ways to help us do that. But the cumulative nature of your fund balance is adjustments from the last couple of years, so it's not really just your FY18 fund balance. I'd really have to go through a full cycle with you to know where we are. And we have started the budget meetings with the different schools and departments, so we're working on building that budget, and I'm hoping to get a better understanding of what's actually needed so that we're proposing a realistic budget.
So just to help me understand, are these, for instance, with insurances, there's often, you don't know what those rates are going to be, and you have to plan ahead with some sort of assumption. Were these excess funds that were kind of like conservative contingencies for these items that were never cleared out at the end of the year? Is that what they were talking about?
It could be, and the growth of that over a number of years.
Okay.
So, and Scott, I see you. I will add that we've always conservatively assumed that everyone was going to retire. So we've budgeted for the retirement bonus to every person. We know not every person is going to retire, but it's been sitting there just in case. Scott?
Procedurally, when you wrap up this 16-17 audit, and we can put a pin in the amount, do we roll it to the taxpayers then, or do we roll it forward into the 17-18, and do we need to complete that cycle before we actually credit back to the towns?
So we're working on completing our FY17 audit, and that will be a complete audit. There's no way that we will complete the FY18 audit before I get
25
the data to
due
the
last
state.
month.
They need to set tax rates like now.
Sure.
Is what they're looking for. So we won't have a complete FY18 audit, but that's one of the things that the auditor has been working on yesterday and today is trying to get our this year, looking at different markers that they saw were off in the 17. So we can make those adjustments, and there might be a few things that they will have to adjust when they complete their FY18 audit, but we will have reduced a lot of that.
But
Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
they won't allow you to change the tax rate. In fact, next June, we're gonna pay half of last year's, but they won't let you touch that tax rate, right?
Right, and that's why I'm saying, even though some of these adjustments really relate back to 16
There's
or
your hockey money.
17, we,
We just bring the.
we called
out
that.
that's gonna be a first for you, Neil. In and out so quick.
All right, Kristen?
I hate showing my ignorance, but when we say the money goes back to the taxpayers, what does that mean?
What it means is that if the impact to the 1920 budget is going to be, we have a surplus, and we also have the insurance pool going back to the taxpayers, so it reduces the tax burden to the taxpayers that would be paid by taxpayers in July of 20 and December of 20, am I right?
So it'll.
No. July 20 is fixed.
So December of 20 and July of 21.
So each.
Yep.
Okay, got it. Thanks.
All right, any other discussion on this?
Just get charged less.
Educational funding letter.
In your packet.
Sorry,
Oh,
Janelle, sorry.
Sorry. I have two more things. I have my IRS audit, which is not as good of news, but,
There goes that.
no.
Here goes that.
The board was made aware a couple months ago that the IRS did choose us for a payroll audit. They came, they reviewed our records, and the end result is we have taxes and penalties due of $13,270.80. That was in the manifest that went around.
I saw that.
We needed to pay them pretty quickly. It was closer to 16,000, but we argued some of the items they said that we didn't have because we were able to prove that we did have them. There were 3 different sections that we were penalized on. The largest piece was a little over $9,000. Individuals were paid as contracted services when they should have been employees. That was about the time that Kathy Woods came on as Student Services Director. And she had gone through at SAU 29 a similar audit and knew that these people should have been employees. So as of July 1, we had actually made these people employees of the FY16 year that the IRS was looking at, but because we didn't pay them consistently for the entire year, they expected us to go back and fix it, which we hadn't done. So that was the largest part of our tax and penalty. The second part was failure to file 1099s on 7 of our contracted services. Most of those were in the medical field, and the information that was given to the business office at the time was that if they were a corporation or an LLC corporation, that you did not have to file a 1099, but if it's medically related, you have to regardless. So that was something that our department had not been aware of, and now we have those flagged for 1099s. So we're correcting things as we learn what needs to happen. And then the last part, there were 2 vendors that we did not have W-9s on. So of course they didn't get a 1099, and that was a little over $500. So not terrible, really, in my eyes, for having that significant of an audit to have those findings. But I wanted to let the board know the results of
Where'd the
that.
money come from?
We do have a dues
Lucky.
and fees line, and so that actually puts that line a little over. It's in the red, to be honest with you.
Yeah, so we won't be transferring funds from that.
There we go. You found it, Nick.
But I wanted to let you know about
Quick
that.
pushing 'em.
And then, not on the agenda, but I thought the board would also want to know, we did receive from Health Trust today our GMR, and it came in at 9.2%. The
2.3 or something like that.
0.6.
So that goes back to negotiations?
Or was it?
What was that?
I think you might.
So when the GMR comes in, then we factor it into the negotiations with the unions, correct?
No, it's.
I don't
Whatever,
know.
yeah.
If that's how you do it, then
So that's a
I will
component of
factor that
strategy,
in.
which we should talk about in non-meeting.
Not,
The
0.6 something.
The average increase in the
teens.
member group was 8.3%, so we came in a little higher than that.
we
I
were
know last
really
year we
low.
came in lower,
really low last year.
What was the specific number, Janelle?
9.2.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. DOE and MS, 25.
That was, I included that in with the unallocated fund balance discussion. Once we complete
that audit process, then I should be able to get those forms completed.
All right. So moving on to the educational funding letter, we have a copy of the proposed funding letter from Lisa in the packet.
Is that this?
Yep, that's that. So it's dated October 16th, 2018, that's today. And, yes, Neil?
There is a retirement is one of the conditions you could be in other than a worker. That's missing. I would think this letter would have a to on it someplace. Is it to all the people up there in Concord, or is it going to be to only our district people? And it has no heading. There's no heading on this letter. You know where this letter's going to go when they put it in the mailbox? Boom, right in the garbage.
Who would you suggest that it be sent to?
Go one more.
All right.
Are these references here, these
Footnote.
footnotes, are they footnotes, are they references, or are they just a list of,
They're indicated in the body of the letter. So footnotes.
Yep, so if you see in parentheses, there's a 4, a 5, 1, a 2. Those are the references.
all right, if they're going to be references, okay.
All right, so you'd like to know who this is addressed to?
Yeah, it's going to be to somebody.
Yep.
And like I said, you don't list retirees as one of the things people can be in.
All right, so, and you see that in paragraph 1, 2, 3, 4.
I don't know where it is. I wrote it down, but then it's on the second page, but I didn't wrote it right here.
I'd like to take a motion on whether we should pass this, and then we can discuss any amendments to it.
As amended, I make a motion.
Okay. Can we narrow down where the retirees portion
second.
was?
Well, retiree should be just one of the items, and then
But
I would put
where?
reference
The
over the
items in-
top and a title on the thing.
I don't
And a
understand
two-
where we're
two
putting
somebody.
retirees.
Yeah, retirees where?
You keep getting the vote, I'll find you where it goes.
All right, so the second part is that you want us to say references here before we start listing out the actual websites, right? Got that? Does anyone else have a comment? Scott?
On the signature page, just because, potentially this can create good contact, can I suggest we list out our names in print next to our signature line?
Oh, that's a good idea.
Okay.
And towns.
And towns, that'd be great.
In the town, too.
Any other discussion? Just trying to pass time until Neil finds his thing, so any other discussion?
Do we have, or has Lisa Witt or Jeremy indicated a specific list of who, where we're going to send this?
I believe the intent was to all the elected officials for
All of the elected officials.
our area, yeah.
That
Well,
represent us.
but that was
At the
actually
state
his
level.
question, for our area or all elected officials in the state? Do we
Ones that
want?
represent
That's a big
us,
list.
I think.
Oh,
Yeah.
it says
Yeah,
that
so how do we
represents
manage
people.
that list and make sure we understand that we're sending out 17 of these or 117 of these?
From my understanding, it was our state level senators and representatives for that encompass our towns.
Monadnock.
The people that have the power to actually make the changes at the state
Right,
level.
the people that are,
Well, the people
we're
that
the
care about what we
constituents
say.
of.
That would be a handy reference, actually, for us to have
Yeah.
as well, to understand where it went, Bill.
It's on our
So,
webpage,
but
actually.
not governor, executive council, or congressional?
I think we need clarification on that, because I don't know what
Just
Lisa's
go to
intention-
Swansea and grab a ballot, and you'll have them all.
No, you won't have them all.
You gotta go to.
You're in
everybody.
the same one, aren't you?
There's a website
Nick?
where you can just type in
You're
the
in the
town
same-
and it tells
Right.
you
Thing in Swansea?
everybody.
Voting rights?
No, he
Still
votes
don't see
in
it.
We are
Roxbury.
all
I know, but he's,
over the place.
again, the same list of people, right?
Same reps.
You guys have JCon.
Yes,
It's on our website,
Have Andy.
under.
I
the
don't think they push
superintendent.
them out of the county, do they?
oh, yeah. We got Nashua,
As,
we got people from Nashua running.
is it the? It must be the fourth paragraph, Neil. As community leaders, working adults, retirees and business owners.
Yeah, where did you
Is
find that?
is-
Oh, it's on the first page.
On the first page, I think.
Does it say retirees?
No, but we can
I
put
know,
that in
but
there.
where does it belong? Which paragraph? 1, 2, 3, 4?
3, well, if you count that little one, the third paragraph.
I don't
Like-
want
there's
to.
like a quote.
I'm lucky to get page numbers. Would I like paragraph numbers? Yes.
You count that as the fourth.
I'd say that's the fourth one down. Jeremy, it's the big one there.
Yep.
Fourth one down.
You want to,
Put retirees in there.
As community leaders, working adults, retirees, and business owners.
Oh, it says workforce, and then it said attractive businesses, skilled workers, families who choose.
Can we put stay-at-home parents?
I was gonna say, what about me?
Do whatever you want. I won't ask you to do
Part-time.
paragraph numbers. That'd be too hard. I get pages.
Maybe we want to put parents.
Why not just say it's a community? Call it good.
As
Also
a community.
Well, community.
I like it.
You looking for a motion? You got a
No,
motion.
no, Neil made a motion, so as amended, we are voting on adding 2, all elected officials in our area, senators and state reps. Adding retirees to paragraph number 3, listing names in
2,
print
3. I would
with our
call it 4,
towns,
but he knows where it is.
indicating that the hyperlinks at the bottom include references.
you want towns too, right? Names and towns?
Yes,
Yeah.
please.
Like I said, I'm pretty sure you could just get a sample Swansea ballot and you'd find everybody you need.
We have it on our website, all of our elected officials, under the superintendent's page.
Great.
All right, we ready to vote?
We don't have a second.
Great.
Second.
Thank you.
Yeah, I
I
thought it
think
was
Kristen
second.
Oh,
was the
sorry, I
second.
missed it. Sorry.
Don't take Kristen's second away.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Betty, did you have something? You had your hand up.
Only that it needs to wait until after November 6th to go out,
Well, it was supposed to also be people running for.
because that's when the vote happens.
new people-
When new people might get voted in. You might be sending it to people that
How about we do
won't be
both?
there.
Kristen?
At the fair, or I don't know what you call it, the Funding 101.
Funding fairness.
Where we first thought of this, it was the thought that it would go out to everyone who was running as well as people who are already in office, so that we would get everybody to kind of make it a talking point for why we should vote for them or not as part of it.
Oh, all right. Well,
I don't know if it's enough time.
Now you need a ballot.
How about we do both? It's like $5 in stamps.
Yeah, that's it.
All right,
Where are you getting
so
that money from?
Yeah. I'll put the $5 up.
Where's that coming from?
I'll put the $5 up.
can we have the revision of the letter come back to us at the next board meeting with a list of people that we propose to send it to? And in that list include
Then we'll go out until after the vote.
Right.
Well, after the
So-
vote.
So I think it's too late anyway, so just
The
after.
vote is November
6th, and we meet the 7th.
Your next board meeting.
Because we don't,
7th.
Can we debate this longer?
Can't they just come in?
If you'd like.
can we have it at the SAU for you early next week and you can come in and sign?
Yep.
And we can hopefully send it out by the end of next week. And we'll put a list of who we're sending it to with it, so you can see.
Send a nudge when it's ready,
Yeah,
please.
that sounds
Yep.
good. We already passed it, so we're good.
Awesome.
Okay.
Email
Poland.
addresses we can save. for
Cheshire
Stan.
Career Center, Jeremy, you're on again.
Hold on, I'm not done with superintendent. Just two things with that. We do have a need to go into non-public under B and C tonight, but they'll both be very, very quick. I reran the numbers. We had some hidden lines that show preschool, so you have those. Those are coming around. And also the sheet with the upcoming events is coming around. Okay, done with superintendent. Moving on to CCC. As you know, Keene voted last week, or maybe you don't know, but you probably know. Keene voted last week to move forward with the late start time for the 2021 school year. And so that was, fortuitous timing because Lisa Spencer and me and I went over to CCC on Monday to talk to them about some of our concerns. So as I talked about last time, we just re-signed our 20-year agreement, which is not ironclad and we can get out of. There's always ways into it. I want to put that out there because people felt like we were stuck in it forever. We expressed our concerns about CCC. We met with the new director, Jim Logan, Kim Baker, who's the director of guidance for Keene. Just Keene, and really talked about it. This year we have 36 kids enrolled right now in CCC classes, and we think a big problem with that is scheduling. That's our opinion, is that the scheduling is very difficult. And the history goes that, when Keene went to block scheduling, it was thought that if we went to block scheduling as well, that would help. And it's still not helping. We're still not lining up. And one of the big problems is that the way we schedule in January, February, they schedule in April. So that runs into problems. There's some disagreement with us about how that scheduling happens. And it breaks down to what we're going with is miscommunication. So we left agreeing to a way to schedule this year that should benefit all of us, that we can really put those classes out to our kids, and if they get in them, hopefully they don't change. We feel like the schedule has changed. What happens is they run into the same problems we run into here. If they don't have enough kids in a class to run, they try to move it to get more kids into that class, which has a domino effect because it affects us and then it affects Fall Mountain as well. So it becomes just a really difficult problem. But we had a great conversation about it. We brought up the late start time. They understand that that's going to be a concern, and they haven't had time to digest this either. This happened really fast for them. But that is something that we're going to continue talking about this year, about how that's going to work. And they're looking at those blocks and how do we ensure that we still have the blocks we need to send our kids, because we don't want to change our start time just because they change their start time, or maybe the board does. But CCC shouldn't dictate that, and that's something that we made clear to them. That's very important to us, that CCC doesn't dictate our start time in that way. That would have to be a community decision, not something that we would do just to get over there. So it was I feel like it was a really hopeful, positive conversation about how we can get more kids in. We also found out that somehow this got missed, that we can start putting 10th graders in some of our courses over there. And that's something that we want to look at and see if there are 10th graders that are interested or able to handle that. And it's not all the courses, certainly, but there are courses that the state has approved for sophomores. And that's something that I don't think either Lisa or I knew that came around this year. So it was a good conversation. The other thing I found out about CCC, there were some questions about how do we pay for it, and how many seats do we get. So I found out about those formulas. So the tuition for CCC is based off of the tuition for Keene as the receiving school, and the state sets the tuition. This year the tuition's set at $5,044.88. We pay 25% of that. The state pays 75% of that. So for each kid we send, we pay $1,261.22. As far as transportation goes, we pay $1 a day per student. So a student, we would kind of get a flat charge of $180, and that's a budgeted amount. So that's how the formula works. And then the other question was, how many seats do we get? So for any given class, what's written is that we get 25% of the seats. And Fall Mountain gets 25%, Keene gets 50% because they have the biggest school. But we talked about the history of that, and we looked at it, and we've never been denied a seat. So we have a class that's running right now that's more us than anybody else. We're well over the 25% because it works out. If we came to a place where there was a really full class, then that formula we'd have to talk about. But in no one's working memory have they ever remembered, on both sides of the table, no one remembers there ever being an opportunity for a kid to take a class and they couldn't because we hit our 25% mark, or that we got charged more because we hit that 25% mark, because it kind of all comes out in the wash. They have declining numbers as well. They wanted to express that, and Fall Mountain's made it really clear that they're finding it harder and harder to do this as well. So there's definitely some questions up in the air about CCC. There's some things that we really want to bring to the advisory board when they meet next. And Neil, I'd definitely love to talk to you about that because you're the school board rep, so you'll definitely go into that, hopefully.
You didn't invite me to the last meeting.
I'm not in charge of it, but I'll make sure you get invited to the next one. To talk about these concerns and how we can do it. I also, we kind of kept the lines of communication open and said that, we need to meet often and talk about this so that we can get our numbers back up into the 70s, the 70s or the 80s that they were a couple of years ago, 5-10 years ago. Because 36 is just really not what we want. We have a lot of kids that could have a lot of great opportunities that are missing out on them.
Lisa?
Right. Brian?
So have we had any time to understand now what is the start time going to do for us? And I mean, they had these discussions now for well over a year. And so with this decision made with the understanding that yes, it is going to severely impact, attending schools outside of Keene, or do we?
It actually shouldn't. So what they're saying right now, like I said, CCC has not had a chance to wrap their brains totally around this. But what they're looking at is how they work their blocks. So they have, we have win time, they have I time, they call it. If they move that, they're thinking if they move that, they can rearrange their blocks. At this start time, really shouldn't throw us off too far. The impact for us, their start time impact shouldn't hit us too hard. And we've kind of made it clear that if it does, we're not going to sit back. We're going to really push hard on that because the schedule needs to be agreed upon by all the people in the region, and part of the regional agreement.
Yeah.
I disagree with that analogy. If you move it out, the kids won't get to their sports and they won't want to go.
We send kids only in the morning. We don't have kids that are there at the end of the day.
Okay. Let me see that schedule.
Our majority of the kids go first block and third block.
All right. Thank you. Any other questions about Cheshire Community Center? Cheshire Career Center, sorry. Spotlight on Mount Caesar?
We did that at public.
Yeah.
I kind of had a feeling it would be 10 o'clock before we got there.
Yeah.
And that was at my exact time, by the way, I told Missy. So we asked if we could move it into
Way to call it.
public.
Okay.
I'm getting better.
Of course, it would have been 9:58 because they took 2 minutes.
We're receiving 6 policies for first read, and as is our practice, we'll go through the rationale for them.
So did everybody receive both the policies and the rationale document in either paper or electronic format?
Yes.
Did anybody not receive it? So yes, at our last meeting, we said we're going to go through the rationale document. It's 10 o'clock. We all can read. So my ask is that we not go through this unless someone feels, to the contrary. But that means we're all responsible for coming to the next meeting informed about what the rationale doc says. So you understand all 6 policies and we can, I don't want to say go through the motions, but actually, yes, go through the motions at the next meeting quickly.
I do have an item.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
KE.
Aye.
I think we need a 4th item. Does not allow public comments to be blocked in any way.
You're suggesting an edit to the proposed policy?
Yes.
We would do that at the second read, so that when we're actually taking up the motion, and we can take up
Okay.
amendments. So if you can bring that to the next meeting, that's a good
I
one.
can do that, but last time you had to modify it on the fly. But I was giving it on the first, you do what you want with it.
Okay.
Any other comments on policies? Good. Sherry, the next one is for you. You had asked, you weren't with us for the last board meeting, but the Swansea Select Board had a request of the CRC.
The Swansea Select Board had invited the Swansea Board members to attend a board meeting of theirs 3 weeks ago now.
About.
And they had some questions for us as we look towards having our joint budget session. I think the most startling thing that came out of it for me was that they really are asking us to consider going back to bonding large projects instead of us doing the big chunks of $1 million or $1.5 million at a time, to really start thinking about taking items to bond situations. I think it's it's a strategy that was used, well, I've only been on 3 years, so I don't know how far. I think there was a time that, we did pass bonds or tried to pass bonds.
1982.
And then I think that became
Kindergarten
less politically viable, that bonds weren't passing, and so they went to the other method. And so we now have a group of the Swansea Selectmen who believe it's time to start thinking about that bond method again for passing building projects.
What was the rationale?
That it would be less of a tax impact over the life of the bond, and that people were more likely to, it was about kind of the time of consumption of the bond. I'm not sure I can articulate that well. Do you remember what they said?
Is that something we should refer to either finance or the facilities team to?
We're already working on it.
Right.
I'm just relaying what the Swansea Select Board had.
I think the $1 million impact to the district is over $500,000 to Swansea every year. And as you said, by bonding it out over time, each year we wouldn't have to spend as much as we are. We'd have to pay for more years, but.
Yeah.
So, just like Betty said, it's even if you did split it in half, you realize in 2 years you'd be paying the same thing. Because you got 2 bonds open.
Right.
If they're 2-year bonds, I guess that would be true.
No, just keep adding them up. Let's say we take $1 million each year, okay? We stopped doing that this year, we've asked for $500,000. Next year, we're gonna ask for $500,000, so now we got $1 million open anyway. So it'll work for a year, but it won't do much.
But what if facilities was asking us to build a school for $25 million? We couldn't pay for that
That's
all
a
at once.
different, that's a different argument, though. That's not gonna be asked for in 1 year.
She said
But it could be
instead
handled
of-
in a bond.
Right, but she said instead of doing the $1 million a year,
She means the $1 million bond.
the basic maintenance and
And,
improvement.
I don't know about bonds well enough that I can explain to you that it might stretch payments out more than just 2 years, but I think there's a possibility. I've seen 10-year bonds and 15-year bonds, and so I think it can spread tax burdens out. You're right, if it gets to that critical point where you've done it for 10 years and now you've got
Pick a
as
number,
much
you're
open.
gonna start to,
Yeah, if they're 10-year bonds and you do it every year for 10 years, yeah, you're no
right
further
back
behind.
where you were. So it's a short-term
that's-
save. Never pass.
Perhaps.
Brian?
I think for us to have that conversation, we would have to have a definitive, 10-year plan, so we could know how much money we had potentially coming up on the books, and then be able to evaluate, a plan that says it's more financially, viable to keep going every year, or if we bond it out and knock these projects out and be done, which is a bigger tax burden in the long run to achieve
Yep.
the entire total plan instead of, kind of winging it, every year or two that we do right now. And that's one of the things that's been plaguing us for a while now. We do not have a 10-year, or a 15 or a 20-year long-term planning right now.
Yep, Rob.
So Janelle, in facilities, Janelle was gracious enough to share with us information she got. I don't remember exactly the source, Janelle, about the bonding. And
New Hampshire Bond Bank.
the taxpayer impact is much lower if it's a longer-term bond than if you do the equivalent of $1 million this year, and with inflation, you keep climbing that way. You correct me if I'm wrong, but it steadied the ship a little bit in terms of the impact to the taxpayer. It wasn't continually climbing.
There's also the advantage that we have leftover funds. If we do it $1 million, $1.5 million, or $2 million per year, we might have some unspent. But if it's a bond and it's long-term, there's really a fixed payment. Am I right about that?
Yes.
Any other questions or comments?
When's the last time we went year to year like we have been and we've had unspent money? Just, I don't know, so I'm just asking.
I think
There
we generally
generally are some
Quite some
carryover
time.
funds, and we find a way to spend them.
except on hockey.
I mean, if it's specified for,
I voted. It's a warrant article, you have to use it for
I'm
that
kidding.
purpose.
if it's specified for asbestos
that
with
how it works?
abatement, then we find some more asbestos somewhere that we can take care of. All right, anyone else?
So nothing else on that, but CRC did meet tonight, and we are doing some more work on the strategic communication plan, and letters to select boards are going out, we're hoping by the end of the week. We haven't nailed down for sure who's going to which meeting, but we feel like, well, we had one meeting that got canceled and one meeting that we didn't have quorum, and so we're up against the time crunch now if we're going to get to select board meetings before our November, or whatever it is, joint meeting. And so we're going to have the letters go out, have Lillian as the contact for select boards that want us to come, and then we'll figure out who's available to go.
But you'll reach out to the board members that are in those towns when you have a date that's firm for each
Yep.
town.
Yep.
Anything else? Are there any other committees that need to report?
Yeah, real quick, because we've moved our November 6th school board meeting to November 7th, both extracurricular and policy, which normally meet the first Wednesday, now have a conflict. So,
They could go on the Tuesday.
so the question for Cheryl and Karen and Kristen and Lynn and I, do we have the ability to meet on either the Tuesday voting day or on the Thursday after?
No, I'm tied up from 11 o'clock till 8 o'clock at
That's
night.
part of the reason we moved it off polling day.
Yeah.
By the way, your committee meetings are listed for the 6th, not the 7th, in the agenda.
You guys want to negotiate this later?
So,
Planting the seed, let's connect offline and pick another date. I don't think we want to just cancel for
I
a
could
month.
meet on Tuesday or the following Wednesday. I could meet on the 6th or the 14th.
What, the CRC?
No, for policy.
Okay, so we'll do that in email tonight or tomorrow.
Okay.
We've made a commitment to this body that we're going to talk about school safety at every meeting. And so for that purpose, we have the School Safety Preparedness Task Force report, the facilities chapter. The entire report looks like this, and I brought it to the last meeting. I wasn't able to get copies for everyone. I will try. Certainly, I'll get it to you digitally, but in the board packet, you have the facilities chapter. It talks about entry points and doors and badges and all kinds of things that we're really already doing, but if you flip all the way to the back and the recommendations on the last page, you can see here that many of the recommendations are things that we're already doing for our district, but I'll accept comments or questions about any of these recommendations that you feel we should focus on more heavily. I know it's tough, maybe everyone didn't get to read it yet. Should we push this to the next agenda so everyone gets to read it? Neil?
I have a couple of comments already. On the second paragraph, you wanted to go to the last page, so it's 57.
The last page has the recommendations.
Yeah, because that's where you want to go.
Yep.
There's motherhood all through this thing, but you got a man trap in there. Man traps are extremely tough to manage. We tried to do that at General Dynamics, and we stopped. And every employee at Electric Boat has a badge on right there, and it still was too hard to do. I think in a few years, when you have facial recognition, you might be able to make this work. But I bet you there's not a school in the country that made man traps work. Changing badges annually is more than a defense contractor does. I don't know why the way we do it. I never worked in that section, and I never did the analyst work, but I think it's got something to do with number of lost badges is when we rebadged. And not firing people and taking their badge away. Somebody loses their badge and gets a replacement. If that happened too often, they replace the badges.
So each school year, you have new employees and you have people who have departed, and what's to
Yeah,
say?
you take a badge away from when he departs, though.
We do new badges every year.
Yeah, we do new badges.
Do they look
You
different?
don't even
from the
have
year
a
before?
policy for badges, right?
I don't know if there's a policy.
Nobody
yet.
can find it.
But the ones from the year before,
We do new badges every year.
I know you do, but it's a
And the
waste.
new school year on them?
The ones from the year before are deactivated, they no longer open the doors.
So there's two. You use your key card.
Mhm.
And those can be
That's a different
deactivated.
thing, yeah.
Right now, I could call Chris Zifrick and say, you have to turn this person's off, and he could do it from home on his phone.
All I'm saying is that you put out more badges with no rules than a defense plant does. Because you do a new one every year. Maybe 5 years, 6 years, you'd get a new badge.
We get them from the people who take our school pictures. They do badges for them as
Yeah,
part of
is
our
it free?
package.
It's built into the
I believe
price.
so. It's built right into the picture contract. I mean, I don't think we've ever paid for them.
And how do you make sure you collect the old ones, Jeremy?
No.
Right, so now you got 2 badges out there, just like that. I guarantee you'll have the loss rate very high.
All right, so I want to ask the board, is it okay if we bring this back and discuss the bulk of this in the next board meeting?
Yes.
That would be our second read sort of this chapter, but can we also have a first read of another chapter, and if so, which? Let me list a couple.
What does the second read do for us?
So just so everybody gets to absorb it and come back at the next meeting and actually talk about what is contained in here, because many of the board members haven't read it yet. Neil?
I would just like to say, if there's any of this stuff added to the budget, I want to talk to it that Saturday meeting. If we're gonna say we're gonna do badges every year, or we're gonna bring in man traps, I'd like it discussed specifically at the budget.
What do you call a man trap?
What had happened is you get a double door.
It's a pit in the ground with
You wanna know what it is?
Alligators?
Really?
Is it on there?
Football's playing at the
They
bottom.
don't call it a man trap in
I
there.
know, I was trying to find out which one you
That's
were
what I was trying
talking
to figure out
about.
what you were talking about too.
What do they call it?
So other chapters that we might discuss are
It's in this big paragraph here. Page 51.
Thank you.
security training around mental health, planning, training, exercises, communications.
Frankly, Scarlett,
Those are the others.
whatever.
All right, so let's do mental health next. Social and emotional learning, stigma, protocols and assessments, suicide, alternatives to suspension and expulsion. These are all in the report about school safety and preparedness. So let's do mental health next. We'll have that as a first read, and we'll dig into this one for, I'm just calling it second read, just because we kind of know what that means. All right. So, can I have a motion on the minutes of October 2nd, 2018?
So move, or second.
All right, is there any discussion on those minutes?
What do you got?
That's Betty's
Any
job.
typos, Kristen, what you got?
You skip the minute.
Becoming a real board member now.
Well, I got it yesterday.
All right, so, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Good, we have also a
I
non-public,
should abstain too, by the way.
so that was Neil and Sherry.
And Kristen.
And Karen, Karen W.
I didn't get to read them.
4 slackers.
And Kristen and Karen.
The other Karen.
Karen Wheeler. Sherry and Neil. All right. Can I have a motion on the non-public?
4.0.
So moved.
Second.
The second was Karen B.
Scott and Karen.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Say,
Abstain.
All right, so that was Sherry, Neil, Karen Wheeler. Moving on to the manifest. Betty, what you got?
For 1718, $7,338.95.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Second from Karen. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? All right, and for 1819?
$1,007,883.12.
Second.
The second came from Sherry. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
Abstain.
Very good. Okay, so for next meeting's agenda, I have where the money is coming from for band, feasibility and appraisals from the Facilities Committee, hockey funding information,
0 and then 1.075.
confirmation that we schedule 11/5 from 6 to 9 for the board training, classroom sizes, and for for the school safety preparedness, we're going to talk about facilities and also introduce the mental health chapter. Anything else?
Yeah,
Neil.
I want to put on hiring of the HR person.
We had agreed as a board that we would look for that position.
No,
in the-
we didn't agree to anything. Neil Moriarty wants HR person on the next week's agenda, or next meeting's agenda.
Okay. Anyone else? All right.
Well,
You're going to
second read on all those
Yeah, I've got
policies.
that. And we'll have,
I would imagine the warrant articles would be discussed also.
and we'll have policies and warrant articles for sure, yeah.
Could we ask for the shell of the warrant articles? Is that doable in 2 weeks? I don't know if you know what we're talking about, but we've seen in the past
Yeah.
it's all the warrant articles pre-spelled out minus the actual dollar values so that we can vote on the language. And so we can start knocking those down meeting to meeting and not be doing them all at the last minute.
And this is why I wanted to get the continuum of the warrant articles done tonight, so we could have the shell wording of the warrant articles for next meeting, but we can always renumber them and add warrant articles in between. Is that something that you could do for us?
Yeah, is it typically in a Word or a Google?
Let's hope it's in the
Just a Word doc or
It's
Google?
Yeah,
I
it's
mean,
generally a Word doc.
Yeah.
Word doc, Google?
Your choice.
A board doc.
No, not a board doc.
Word.
Word
Oh.
or Google.
Word.
Okay.
Anything else for next meeting?
Handwritten, chipped on
And second,
stone.
public comments?
You have any public comments?
Cameraman.
We've already discussed where we stand with the litigation and the and the decision on the funding pool, right? So we don't have any need for non-public.
Yes, we do.
do.
I need a
Yeah, he said he had two.
Said he had
Okay,
two
a B
items.
and a C?
Yep.
Okay. Let's take a short break and then we'll go into non-public for B and C. Be back in 5 minutes.